Epictetus as reported by Arrian. 1928 translation by William Abbott Oldfather. 2024 modern English translation by GPT 3.5 Turbo 16K. The Facilitator and Editor, Sir Adam S. Barnett. Introduction. Epictetus emerges as a revered figure, an exemplar of resilience and wisdom amidst the adversities of life. Born a slave in Hierapolis, Phrygia, present-day Pamukkale, Turkey, around 55 CE, Epictetus faced the harsh realities of servitude. It was in this crucible of adversity that the foundations of his Stoic philosophy were forged. Epictetus' teachings were not recorded by him personally, but rather meticulously transcribed by his devoted student, Arrian, around 108 CE. The collection, known as the Discourses, encapsulates Epictetus' profound insights into the nature of existence and the principles of Stoicism. Drawing upon the Stoic tradition, Epictetus advocates for the cultivation of inner virtue, emphasizing the importance of maintaining tranquility in the face of external circumstances. His writings reflect the Stoic commitment to accepting what is beyond one's control while focusing on the mastery of one's own thoughts and actions. Epictetus' narrative is a testament to the transformative power of philosophy in navigating the complexities of life. Book 1. Chapter 1. The things which are under our control and not under our control. Among the various arts and faculties, none are self-reflective, and therefore, none can either approve or disapprove of themselves. How much contemplation can the art of grammar achieve? Only enough to pass judgment on what is written. How about the art of music? Only enough to pass judgment on the melody. But do either of them contemplate themselves? Not at all. However, if you are uncertain about what to write to a friend, the art of grammar can guide you, yet it cannot tell you whether you should write to your friend at all. The same applies to the art of music and melodies. It cannot tell you whether you should sing and play the lyre at this moment or not. So, which art or faculty can provide such guidance? The one that contemplates both itself and everything else. And what is this? The reasoning faculty. It is the only one we possess that can understand itself, what it is capable of, and how valuable a gift it is to us, as well as all the other faculties. For what else tells us that gold is beautiful? Certainly not the gold itself. It is the faculty that utilizes external impressions. What else discerns the art of music, the art of grammar, and other arts and faculties, judging their usefulness and pointing out the appropriate occasions for their application? Nothing else does. As was appropriate, therefore, the gods have only given us control over the most excellent faculty of all, which dominates the rest, the ability to make proper use of external impressions. However, they have not given us control over the others. Was it because they did not want to? I, for one, believe that if they could, they would have entrusted us with the others as well. But they simply could not do that. You see, since we are on earth, bound by earthly bodies and surrounded by earthly companions, how could we not be hindered by external things in relation to them? But what does Zeus say? Epictetus, if it were possible, I would have made both your insignificant body and your small estate free and unhindered. But as it is, do not forget this. Your body is not your own, but merely clay cleverly composed. However, since I could not give you that, we have given you a certain part of ourselves, this faculty of choice and refusal, of desire and aversion. In other words, the faculty that makes use of external impressions. If you care for this and invest all that you have in it, you will never be obstructed, never hindered, you will not groan, blame, or flatter anyone. So, what do you think? Are these things insignificant to you? Far from it. Are you then satisfied with them? I pray to the gods that I may be. But now, even though we have the power to care for and devote ourselves to only one thing, we choose instead to care for many things and be bound tightly to them, our bodies, our possessions, our siblings, friends, children, and slaves. Because of this, being tied to many things, we are burdened and dragged down by them. That is why, if bad weather prevents us from sailing, we sit down and fidget, constantly looking around. What wind is blowing? We ask. The north wind. What does that have to do with us? When will the west wind blow? Whenever it pleases, sir, or rather, whenever Aeolus pleases. Because God has not made you the steward of the winds, but Aeolus. So what? We must make the best of what is under our control and accept the rest as it is. How is it then? It is as God wills. Am I the only one who must be beheaded now? Well, did you want everyone to be beheaded just to console you? Are you not willing to stretch out your neck like a certain lad Arrian in Rome did when Nero ordered him to be beheaded? He stretched out his neck and received the blow, but since it was weak, he recoiled for a moment, and then stretched out his neck again. Yes, and even before that, when Epictetus, a freedman of Nero, approached a certain man and asked about the reason for his offense, he replied, "If I want anything, I will speak to your master." So what support must we have at hand in such circumstances? Well, what else but the knowledge of what belongs to me and what doesn't? What is permitted to me and what is not? I must die. Must I also die while groaning? I must be imprisoned. Must I also wail? I must go into exile. Does anyone prevent me from doing so with a smile, cheerfulness, and serenity? Tell us your secrets. I will not say a word, because that is under my control. But I will restrain you. What is it that you say, man? Restrain me? You may restrain my leg, but you cannot overpower my moral purpose. Not even Zeus himself has the power to do so. I will throw you into prison. My insignificant body, rather. I will behead you. Well, when did I ever tell you that my neck is the only one that cannot be severed? These are the lessons that philosophers should practice. These they should write down daily, and these they should exercise themselves in. Thrasea used to say, "I would rather be killed today than banished tomorrow." What did Rufus say to him then? If you choose death as the heavier of the two misfortunes, what a foolish choice. But if you choose it as the lighter, who has given you the choice? Are you not willing to be content with what has been given to you? Therefore, what did Agrippinus used to say? I am not standing in my own way. Word was brought to him, your case is being tried in the Senate. Good luck to me. But it is already the 5th hour. He was in the habit of exercising, and then taking a cold bath at that hour. Let us go and exercise. After he had finished his exercise, someone came and told him, you have been condemned. To exile, he says, or to death? To exile. What about my property? It has not been confiscated. Well then, let us go to Aricia and have our lunch there. This is what it means to have practiced the lessons one should practice, to have free desire and aversion from every hindrance and made them immune to chance. I must die. If it is now, I will die now, and if later, I will have lunch now, since it is lunchtime, and afterwards I will die at the appointed time. How? As a man who is returning what belongs to someone else. Chapter 2. How can a man maintain his true character in every situation? To a rational being, only the irrational is unbearable, while the rational is bearable. Blows are not inherently unbearable. How so? Let me explain. The Spartans willingly endure floggings once they understand that it is rational to do so. But is it not unbearable to be hanged? Hardly. In fact, whenever a person believes it is rational, they go and hang themselves. In short, if we observe, we will find that mankind is distressed by nothing as much as the irrational, and attracted to nothing as much as the rational. Now, it just so happens that what is rational and irrational differs for each person, just like good and evil, and what is beneficial and what is not beneficial. This is precisely why we need education, so that we can learn how to adapt our preconceived ideas of what is rational and irrational to specific situations in accordance with nature. But in determining what is rational and irrational, we rely not only on our assessment of the value of external things, but also on the criteria of what aligns with our own character. To one person, it is reasonable to hold a chamber pot for another, since they only consider that if they do not hold it, they will be beaten and go hungry. But another person feels that it is not only unbearable to hold such a pot themselves, but even to tolerate someone else doing so. If you ask me, should I hold the pot or not? I will tell you that getting food is more valuable than not getting it, and being beaten is more detrimental than not being beaten. So, if you measure your interests by these standards, go ahead and hold the pot. Yes, but it would be unworthy of me. That is an additional consideration that you, and not I, must introduce into the question. For you are the one who knows yourself, how much you value yourself, and at what price you sell yourself. Different people sell themselves at different prices. Therefore, when Florus was considering whether he should participate in Nero's festival and make a personal contribution to it, Agrippinus told him, participate. And when Florus asked, why don't you participate yourself? He replied, me. I don't even entertain the question. For when a person stoops to consider such questions, I mean, to estimate the value of external things, and calculates them one by one, they come close to those who have forgotten their own true character. Now, what is it you ask me? Is death or life preferable? I answer, life. Pain or pleasure? I answer, pleasure. But unless I take part in the tragedy, I will be beheaded. Then go ahead and take part. But I will not. Why not? Because you see yourself as just a single thread among all the threads that make up the fabric. What follows, then? It means that you should consider how you may resemble all other people, just as even a single thread wants to have no superiority over the other threads. But I want to be the red thread, that small and brilliant part that makes the rest appear beautiful and pleasing. So why do you tell me, be like the majority of people? And if I do that, how can I still be the red thread? This is what Helvidius Priscus also saw, and having seen it, he acted accordingly. When Vespasian sent him a message telling him not to attend a Senate meeting, he replied, "It is within your power to not allow me to be a member of the Senate, but as long as I am one, I must attend its meetings." Very well, but when you attend, remain silent. Don't ask for my opinion, and I will remain silent. But I must ask for your opinion, and I must answer what I believe is right. But if you speak, I will put you to death. Well, when did I ever tell you that I am immortal? You will do your part, and I will do mine. It is your decision to execute me, mine to die without fear, your choice to exile, mine to depart without sorrow. So what good did Priscus achieve, who was but one individual? And what good does the red color do to the cloak? It simply stands out prominently, as red, serving as a fine example to others. However, if Caesar had told someone else in a similar situation not to attend Senate meetings, that person would have responded, "Thank you for excusing me." Caesar would not have even attempted to avoid attending, knowing that he would either remain silent or speak exactly what Caesar wanted to hear, adding even more to it. Similarly, there was an athlete who faced the danger of death unless his genitals were amputated. His brother, who happened to be a philosopher, approached him and asked, "Well, brother, what are you going to do? Shall we remove this body part and return to the gymnasium once more?" The athlete refused, hardened his heart, and died. When someone asked, how did he do this? As an athlete or as a philosopher? Epictetus replied, as a human being, and as a human being who had been recognized at the Olympic Games and had competed in them, who was familiar with such places, and not just someone who had been oiled at Bateau's wrestling school. However, another person would have willingly sacrificed even their own neck if it meant they could live without it. This is what we mean by respecting one's own character, and its strength is evident in those who consistently contribute to their own deliberations. So, Epictetus, shave off your beard. If I am a philosopher, I respond, I will not shave it off. But I will cut off your neck. If that will benefit you, then go ahead and do it. Someone asked, how can each of us become aware of what is appropriate for our own character? Epictetus replied, how is it that when a lion charges, only the bull is aware of its own strength and rushes forward to defend the entire herd? Isn't it clear that with the possession of strength comes an immediate awareness of it as well? Therefore, among us too, anyone who possesses such strength will not be unaware of it. However, just as a bull does not become a bull all at once, and a person does not become noble overnight, a person must undergo training and preparation, not recklessly plunging into what is unsuitable for them. Just think about the value at which you sell your freedom of choice. If you must sell it, at least do not sell it cheaply. The great and exceptional deeds may befit others like Socrates and those of his caliber. So why is it that not all or many people become like him? Do all horses become swift? Do all dogs become keen at following scents? What then? Just because I lack natural talents, should I give up on my discipline? Far from it. Epictetus may not be better than Socrates, but if I am not worse, then that is sufficient for me. For I shall not be a strong man, either, and yet I do not neglect my body, nor a wealthy man, and yet I do not neglect my possessions, nor, in other words, is there any other area in which we give up the appropriate discipline simply because we despair of achieving the highest? Chapter 3 from the thesis that God is the Father of mankind. How can one proceed to the consequences? If a person could fully embrace, as they should, the belief that we are all primarily begotten of God, and that God is the Father of both humans and gods, I believe that they will not entertain any low or mean thoughts about themselves. Yet, if Caesar adopts you, no one will be able to tolerate your arrogance. But if you know that you are a son of Zeus, will you not be filled with pride? However, we are not aware of this. But since these two elements were combined in our conception, on one hand, the body, which we share with animals, and on the other hand, reason and intelligence, which we share with gods. Some of us lean towards the former connection, which is unfortunate and mortal, and only a few towards the divine and blessed one. Therefore, since it is inevitable that every person, regardless of who they are, should deal with each thing according to the opinion they form about it, these few, who believe that they are called to loyalty, self-respect, and sound judgment in the use of external impressions by their birth, do not harbor low or mean thoughts about themselves, whereas the majority do the opposite. For what am I? A miserable, insignificant person, they say, and look, my wretched, insignificant flesh. Indeed, it is wretched, but you also have something better than your insignificant flesh. So why abandon that and cling to this? It is because of this connection to the flesh that those of us who lean towards it become like wolves, untrustworthy, deceitful, and harmful, and others become like lions, wild, fierce, and untamed, but most of us become foxes, which is to say, scoundrels of the animal kingdom. For what else is a slanderous and malicious person but a fox, or something even more deceitful and degraded? Therefore, be cautious and beware of becoming one of these deceitful creatures. Chapter 4 Progress. He who is making progress, having learned from the philosophers that desire is for good things and aversion is towards evil things, and having also learned that serenity and calmness can only be achieved by a person as they succeed in obtaining the objects of desire and as they avoid encountering the objects of aversion, such a person has completely eliminated desire from themselves, or else postponed it to another time, and only feels aversion towards things that involve freedom of choice. For if they avoid anything that is not a matter of free choice, they know that at some point they will encounter something despite their aversion to it, and will come to harm. Now, if it is virtue that promises to create happiness, calm, and serenity, then progress towards virtue is progress towards achieving these states of mind. It is always true that progress is an approach towards the goal that perfection in anything leads to. So why do we acknowledge virtue as such, but seek progress and display it in other things? What is the purpose of virtue? Serenity. So, who is making progress? Is it the person who has read many treatises by Chrysippus? Is virtue merely gaining knowledge of Chrysippus' works? If that is the case, progress is nothing more than acquiring knowledge of Chrysippus' writings. But now, while we acknowledge that virtue produces one thing, we claim that progress towards virtue produces something else. So-and-so, someone says, is already able to read Chrysippus all by himself. By the gods, what great progress you are making! Why do you mock him? Why do you try to divert him from realizing his own shortcomings? Aren't you willing to show him the real work of virtue, so he can learn where to find his progress? Look for it there, wretch, where your work lies. And where is your work? It lies in desire and aversion, so you do not miss what you desire and avoid what you want to avoid. It lies in making choices and refusals, so you do not make any mistakes in them. It lies in giving and withholding judgment, so you do not get deceived. But first, let us focus on the most important points. Yet if you are in a state of fear and grief when you try to be resistant to encountering what you want to avoid, how are you making progress? Show me your progress in matters like the following. For example, if I were talking to an athlete and said, "Show me your shoulders," and they responded, "Look at my jumping weights." Come on, you and your jumping weights. I want to see the effect of the jumping weights. Take the treatise on choice and see how I've mastered it. I am not interested in that, you slave, but rather how you act in your choices and refusals, desires, and aversions, how you approach things, apply yourself to them, and prepare yourself. Are you acting in harmony with nature or against it? If you are acting in harmony, show me that, and I will tell you that you are making progress. But if you are acting against it, then go away and do not limit yourself to explaining your books, but go and write something of the same kind yourself. And what will you gain from that? Don't you know that the whole book only costs 5 denarii? Do you think the person explaining it is worth more than 5 denarii? So never look for your work in one place and your progress in another. Where, then, is progress? If any man among you, withdrawing from external things, has turned his attention to the question of his own moral purpose, cultivating and perfecting it so as to make it finally in harmony with nature, elevated, free, unhindered, untrammeled, faithful, and honorable, and if he has learned that he who desires or avoids the things that are not under his control can neither be faithful nor free, but must himself be changed and tossed to and fro with them, and must end up subordinating himself to others, those who are able to obtain or prevent these things that he desires or avoids, and if, finally, when he wakes up in the morning he proceeds to keep and observe all this that he has learned, if he bathes as a faithful man, eats as a self-respecting man. Similarly, whatever the subject matter may be with which he has to deal, putting into practice his guiding principles, as the runner does when he applies the principles of running, and the voice trainer when he applies the principles of voice training. This is the man who truly makes progress, and the man who has not traveled aimlessly is this one. But if he has strived merely to attain the state which he finds in his books and works only at that, and has made that the goal of his travels, I urge him to go home immediately and not neglect his concerns there, since the goal to which he has traveled is nothing. But not so with the other goal, to study how a man may rid his life of sorrows and lamentations, and of such cries as, woe is me, and wretch that I am, and of misfortune and failure, and to learn the meaning of death, exile, prison, hemlock, so that he may be able to say in prison, Dear Crito, if so it pleases the gods, so be it, rather than, alas, poor me, an old man, it is for this that I have kept my gray hairs. Who says such things? Do you think that I will name you some man held in low esteem and of low social status? Does not Priam say it? Does not Oedipus? Any more, all kings say it. For what are tragedies but the portrayal in tragic verse of the sufferings of men who have admired things external? If indeed one had to be deceived into learning that among things external and independent of our free choice none concerns us, I, for my part, would consent to a deception which would result in my living thereafter serenely and without turmoil. But as for you, you will yourselves see to your own preference. What, then, does Chrysippus provide us? That you may know, he says, that these things are not false from which serenity arises and tranquility comes to us. Take my books, and you shall know how conformable and harmonious with nature are the things which render me tranquil. Oh, the great good fortune! Oh, the great benefactor who points the way. To Triptolemus, indeed, all men have established shrines and altars, because he gave us as food the fruits of cultivation, but to him who has discovered, and brought to light, and imparted to all men the truth which deals, not with mere life, but with a good life. Who among you has for that set up an altar in his honor, or dedicated a temple or a statue, or bows down to God in gratitude for him? But because the gods have given us the vine or wheat, for that do we make sacrifice, and yet because they have brought forth such a fruit in a human mind, whereby they purpose to show us the truth regarding happiness, shall we fail to render thanks unto God for this? Chapter 5 Against the Academics. If a man, says Epictetus, resists truths that are all too evident, in opposing him it is not easy to find an argument by which one may cause him to change his opinion. The reason for this is not the man's ability or the teacher's weakness. When a man becomes stubborn and unyielding in an argument, it becomes impossible to reason with him. There are two types of stubbornness. One is intellectual stubbornness, and the other is a lack of shame, where a person refuses to acknowledge obvious truths or leave the argument. Most of us fear physical paralysis and would do anything to avoid it, but we pay little attention to the paralysis of the soul. Even when it comes to the soul itself, if a person is unable to follow or understand an argument, we consider them to be in a bad state. But if a person's sense of shame and self-respect is deadened, we praise it as strength of character. Can you trust your senses to tell you that you are awake? No, he answers, just like when I dream and believe I'm awake. Is there no difference between these two experiences? None. Can I continue arguing with this person? And how can I make him realize his own paralysis? He does realize it, but pretends not to. He is even worse than a corpse. One person does not notice the contradiction and is in a bad state. Another person notices it but remains unmoved and does not improve. Their sense of shame and self-respect have been stripped away, and their ability to reason has been dulled. Can I call this strength of character? Absolutely not, unless I am referring to the kind of strength that allows indecent individuals to say and do whatever they please in public. Chapter 6, Providence. From everything that happens in the universe, a person can easily find reasons to praise Providence if they possess two qualities: the ability to see the bigger picture in each individual instance and a sense of gratitude. Without these qualities, one person will fail to see the usefulness in what has occurred, and another person, even if they do see it, will not feel grateful for it. If God had created colors but not the ability to see them, what would be the point? None. Conversely, if he had created the ability to see but made objects that cannot be seen, what would be the point? None. And what if he had created both, but not light? Even then, it would be useless. Who, then, has arranged these things? Who has matched the sword to the scabbard and the scabbard to the sword? No one? Surely, from the very design of all created objects, we can conclude that they are the product of some artisan and not a result of random construction. Does every work reveal its creator, but do visible objects, vision, and light not reveal him? And the male and female, and the desire for intimacy between them, and the ability to utilize the organs designed for this purpose, do these things not reveal their creator as well? Well, let us acknowledge this for these things. But what about the remarkable structure of the intellect? When we encounter tangible objects, it is not just their forms that are impressed upon us, but we also could select, subtract, add, and combine them in various ways. And, by Zeus, We even have the capacity to move from some things to others that are related to them in some manner. Isn't all of this enough to make our friends consider the existence of the Creator? Otherwise, they should explain to us what causes each of these outcomes, or how it is possible for such marvelous and masterfully crafted objects to come into existence randomly and spontaneously. Now, is it only in the case of humans that these things occur? Indeed, you will find many things that are unique to humans, things that the rational animal specifically requires. However, you will also find many things that we share with irrational animals. Do they also understand what happens? No, for there is a distinction between using something and understanding it. God has given animals the ability to use external impressions, and us the ability to understand the use of external impressions. Thus, for animals, it is sufficient to eat, drink, rest, procreate, and perform other tasks within their own domain. But for us, who have been bestowed with the additional gift of understanding, these things are no longer enough. Unless we act appropriately, methodically, and in accordance with our own nature and constitution, we will not achieve our own goals. Because beings with different constitutions have different works and purposes. For a being whose constitution is suited for mere use, use alone is sufficient. But when a being also possesses the faculty of understanding, unless the principle of appropriateness is added, they will never fulfill their purpose. So what about the animals? God has created each animal for a specific purpose, one to be eaten, another to serve in farming, another to produce cheese, and so on. For these functions, what need do they have to understand external impressions and differentiate between them? But God has brought humans into the world to be observers of himself and his works, and not just observers, but also interpreters. Therefore, it is disgraceful for humans to begin and end where the irrational animals do. Instead, we should start where they do, but conclude where nature has finished in dealing with us. Now she did not stop until she reached contemplation and understanding and a way of life in harmony with nature. So be careful, lest you die without ever having witnessed these things. But you travel to Olympia to see the work of Phidias, and each of you considers it unfortunate to die without seeing such sights. Yet when there is no need to travel at all because Zeus is already there, present in his works, won't you long to see and understand these works? Will you refuse to perceive who you are, why you were born, or the purpose for which you have been given sight? But some unpleasant and difficult things happen in life. And don't they happen at Olympia too? Don't you sweat? Aren't you cramped and crowded? Don't you bathe uncomfortably? Aren't you soaked when it rains? Don't you have your fill of noise, shouting, and other annoyances? But I imagine that you endure all of this because you balance it against the memorable nature of the spectacle. Come now, haven't you been given the faculties to bear whatever happens? Haven't you been given magnanimity? Haven't you been given courage? Haven't you been given endurance? And why should I care about anything that may happen if I am magnanimous? What should disturb me, trouble me, or seem grievous to me? Should I fail to use my faculties for the purpose for which I have received them and instead grieve and lament over events that occur? Yes, but my nose is running. What are your hands for, then, servant? Isn't it to wipe your nose? Is it reasonable, then, that there should be running noses in the world? And how much better it would be for you to wipe your nose than to complain. Or what do you think Heracles would have achieved if there had not been a lion like the one he encountered, and a hydra, and a stag, and a boar, and wicked and brutal men, whom he made it his business to drive out and eliminate? And what would he have been doing if nothing of the sort existed? Isn't it clear that he would have wrapped himself up in a blanket and slept? Firstly, he would never have become Heracles by sleeping away his entire life in such luxury and comfort. But even if he had, what good would he have been? What would have been the use of his arms and his overall prowess, his steadfastness and nobility, if such circumstances and opportunities had not stirred and tested him? So what then? Should he have prepared these challenges for himself and tried to bring a lion, a boar, and a hydra into his own country from somewhere? That would have been foolish and mad. But since they did exist and were found in the world, they were useful as a means of revealing and exercising our inner strength. So now, knowing these things, take a moment to contemplate the abilities that you possess, and once you have contemplated, say, bring on any difficulty, O Zeus. For I have been equipped by you and have the resources to distinguish myself by making use of the things that happen. But no, you sit there trembling in fear that something might happen, and you lament, grieve, and groan about other things that are happening. And then you blame the gods. What else can be the result of such a dishonorable spirit but sheer impiety? And yet, God has not only given us these abilities to bear everything that happens without being degraded or crushed, but as a good king and a true father, he has given them to us without any restraint, compulsion, or hindrance. He has put the whole matter under our control, without even reserving any power for himself to prevent or hinder us. Although you have these abilities completely free and your own, you do not use them, nor do you realize what gifts you have received and from whom. Instead, you sit there sorrowing and groaning, some of you even blinded to the giver himself, not even acknowledging your benefactor. And others, with their dishonorable spirit, turn to fault-finding and complaints against God. And yet, even though I can show you that you have the resources and qualities for magnanimity and courage, can you show me what resources you must justify fault-finding and complaining? Chapter 7: The use of ambiguous premises, hypothetical arguments, and the like. Most people are unaware that the handling of arguments involving ambiguous and hypothetical premises, and those that derive syllogisms through questioning, and in general, the handling of all such arguments, has an impact on the duties of life. Because our goal in every matter of inquiry is to learn how the good and excellent person can find the appropriate course and conduct themselves appropriately in it. So let them say either that the good person will not engage in the contest of question and answer, or that once they have engaged, they will not take any care to avoid careless and haphazard conduct in question and answer. Or, if they do not accept either of these alternatives, they must admit that some investigation should be made into the topics that primarily concern question and answer. For what is the professed objective of reasoning? To state the truth, eliminate falsehood, and suspend judgment in uncertain cases. Is it enough, then, to learn only this? Yes, it is enough, someone says. But is it also enough for someone who wants to avoid making mistakes and using money to be told the reason genuine coins are accepted and counterfeit ones are rejected? No, it is not enough. Well, what must be added to this? What else but the ability to test and distinguish between genuine coins and counterfeit ones? Therefore, in reasoning, mere words are not enough, right? On the contrary, it is necessary to develop the ability to test the true, the false, and the uncertain, and to distinguish between them. It is necessary. What else is proposed in reasoning besides this? Please accept the consequence of what you have properly acknowledged. Come, is it enough, then, in this case also merely to know that this thing is true? It is not enough, but one must learn in what way a thing follows consequently upon certain other things, and how sometimes one thing follows upon one, and at other times upon several together. Is it not, then, necessary that a person should also acquire this ability if they are to intelligently participate in an argument, and not only prove each point when they attempt to prove it, but also understand the argument of those who are conducting a proof, and not be misled by individuals who quibble as though they were proving something? As a result, a science has emerged among us, which deals with inferential arguments and logical reasoning, and trains individuals in these skills. However, there are occasions when we have soundly reasoned and granted the premises, and the inference drawn from them is such and such, and even though it is false, it remains the inference. What should I do then? Accept the fallacy? And how is that possible? Well, should I say, it was not sound reasoning for me to grant the premises? No, that is not permissible either. Or this does not follow from what has been granted. But that is also not permissible. So what must be done in these circumstances? Is it not this, that the fact of having borrowed is not enough to prove that one is still in debt, but we must add the circumstance that one abides by the loan, that is, has not paid it, and just as so, our having once granted the premises is not enough to compel us to accept the inference, but we must abide by our acceptance of the premises? And furthermore, if the premises remain unchanged until the end, and are the same as when they were granted, then it is necessary for us to abide by our acceptance of them, and to accept the conclusion that has been drawn from them. Because from our perspective and in our way of thinking, this inference no longer results from the premises, since we have withdrawn our previous agreement with the premises. Therefore, it is necessary to examine premises of this kind and the modifications and changes that can occur to them, whereby, at the very moment the question is asked, or the answer is given, or the deduction is made, or at some other similar stage in the argument, the premises take on altered meanings and cause confusion for those who do not see the resulting consequences. Why is this necessary? So that we may not behave inappropriately, randomly, or in a state of confusion in this matter. The same applies to hypotheses and hypothetical arguments, because at times it is necessary to assume a hypothesis as a sort of foundation for the subsequent argument. Are we, therefore, supposed to accept every hypothesis that is proposed, or not everyone? And if not everyone, which one? And when someone has accepted a hypothesis, must they stick with it forever and defend it? Or are there times when they should abandon it and only accept the consequences that follow from it without accepting those that contradict it? Yes. But someone says, if you once admit a hypothesis that involves a possibility, I will force you to be led to an impossibility. Should the wise person refuse to engage with this individual and avoid inquiry and discussion with them? Yet who but the wise can use argument and skillful in questioning and answering, and, by Zeus, immune to deceit and deceptive fallacies? But should they argue and then not try to avoid conducting themselves recklessly and randomly in argument? And if they do not, how will they still be the kind of person we think they are? But without some exercise and preparation in formal reasoning, how will they be able to maintain the continuity of the argument? Let them demonstrate that they will be able to, and all these speculations become unnecessary. They were absurd and inconsistent with our idea of a good person. Why are we still lazy and complacent, seeking excuses to avoid working hard or even staying up late, as we try to improve our own reasoning? If then I make mistakes in these matters, I have not murdered my own father, have I? Slave, please tell me, where was there a father for you to murder in this case? What have you done? You ask. You have made the only possible mistake in the matter. Indeed, this is exactly what I said to Rufus when he criticized me for not discovering the one omission in a certain argument. Well, I said, it's not as bad as if I had burned down the Capitol. But he replied, slave, the omission here is the Capitol. Or are there no other mistakes besides setting fire to the Capitol and murdering one's father? But to use the external impressions that come to one recklessly, foolishly, and randomly, to fail to follow an argument, or demonstration, or fallacy, in short. To fail to see and question and answer what is consistent or inconsistent with one's position, isn't any of these things a mistake? Chapter 8. The reasoning faculties, in the case of the uneducated, are not free from error. In as many ways as it is possible to vary the meaning of equivalent terms, a person can also vary the forms of their controversial arguments in their reasoning inferences. Take this argument, for instance. If you have borrowed and have not repaid, you owe me the money. Now you have not borrowed and have not repaid. Therefore, you do not owe me the money. And no person is better suited to use such variations skillfully than the philosopher. Because if the enthymeme is an incomplete syllogism, someone who has been trained in the perfect syllogism would also be competent in dealing with the imperfect one. So why do we neglect to practice and challenge ourselves in this way? Because even now, without receiving practice in these matters or being diverted from the study of morality, we still do not make progress towards the beautiful and the good. What should we then expect if we were to take on this occupation as well? Especially since it would not only be an additional occupation that distracts us from more necessary ones, but it would also be an exceptional excuse for arrogance and vanity. Because argumentation and persuasive reasoning have great power, especially if they are excessively practiced and adorned with language. The reason is that, in general, any skill acquired by the uneducated and weak can be dangerous for them, as it tends to make them conceited and inflated with pride. How can we persuade a young person who excels in these skills to make them a part of themselves instead of becoming a slave to them? Would they not disregard all these reasons and strut around in our presence, full of conceit and arrogance, not even submitting if someone reminds them of their shortcomings and mistakes? So what? Was not Plato a philosopher? Yes. And was not Hippocrates a physician? But you can see how eloquently Hippocrates expresses himself. Does Hippocrates express himself so eloquently because he is a physician? So why do you confuse things that have been combined in the same person for no reason? Now, if Plato was handsome and strong, should I sit down and strive to become handsome or strong, assuming that this is necessary for philosophy, just because a certain philosopher was both handsome and a philosopher at the same time? Are you not willing to observe and distinguish what it is that makes someone a philosopher and what qualities they possess for no reason? Now, if I were a philosopher, should you become lame like me? So what? Am I depriving you of these abilities? Far from it. Just as I am not depriving you of the ability to see. But if you ask me what is the good of a person, I can give you no other answer than that it is a type of moral purpose. Chapter 9. How can a person proceed to the consequences from the thesis that we are related to God? If what the philosophers say about the kinship between God and humans is true, what other course is there for people but to follow the path that Socrates took when asked about his nationality, never saying I am an Athenian or I am a Corinthian, but rather saying I am a citizen of the universe? Why do you say that you are an Athenian, instead of just mentioning the small corner of the world where your insignificant body was born? Or is it clear that you are taking the place that holds higher authority and encompasses not just your small corner, but also your family and the source from which your lineage has come, from your ancestors to yourself, and calling yourself Athenian or Corinthian based on that? Well, then, anyone who has carefully studied the administration of the universe and has learned that the greatest and most authoritative and most comprehensive of all governments is this one, which consists of humans and God, and that the seeds of existence have descended from him not just to my father or my grandfather, but to all things that are born and grow on earth, and especially to rational beings, since it is by nature theirs alone to have communion in the society of God. Being intertwined with him through reason, why should such a person not call themselves a citizen of the universe? Why should they not call themselves a child of God? And why should they fear anything that happens among humans? What? Is kinship with Caesar or any other powerful person in Rome enough to enable people to live securely, free from contempt, and without fear of anything? But to have God as our Creator, Father, and Guardian, should that not be enough to deliver us from griefs and fears? And what will I eat? Someone asks, if I have nothing. And what about slaves? What about runaways? What do they rely on when they leave their masters? Do they rely on their lands, their slaves, or their silver vessels? No, they rely on nothing but themselves, and yet food does not fail them. And should it be necessary for our philosopher, indeed, when he goes out, to rely on others for his assurance and his refreshment, instead of taking care of himself, and to be more worthless and cowardly than the irrational animals, each of which is self-sufficient, and lacks neither its own proper food nor the way of life that is suitable to it and in harmony with nature? As for me, I believe that the older man should not be sitting here devising how to prevent you from thinking too lowly of yourselves, or from taking a mean or ignoble position regarding yourselves in your discussions. He should rather be striving to prevent there being among you any young men of such a sort that, once they have realized their connection to the gods, and that we have these burdens as if attached to us, the body and its possessions, and whatever things are necessary for us to manage life in our stay here, they may desire to cast aside all these things as burdensome, vexatious, and unprofitable, and depart to their own kind. And this is the struggle in which your teacher and trainer, if he really amounted to anything, should be engaged. You, on your part, would come to him saying, Epictetus, we can no longer bear to be imprisoned with this insignificant body, providing it with food and drink, and resting and cleansing it, and, to top it all off, being brought into contact with these people and those because of it. Aren't these things indifferent, indeed, nothing to us? And isn't death not an evil? And aren't we in a sense related to God, and haven't we come from him? Allow us to return to where we came from. Allow us to finally be freed from these burdens that are attached to us and weigh us down. Here are robbers and thieves and courts of law, and those who are called tyrants. They think they have power over us because of the insignificant body and its possessions. Allow us to show them that they have power over no one. And then it would be my role to say, men, wait for God. When he gives the signal and sets you free from this service, then you shall depart to him. But for now, endure to remain in this place, where he has placed you. This time of your stay here is indeed short, and easy to bear for men of your convictions. For what tyrant, or what thief, or what courts of law are any longer formidable to those who have thus disregarded the body and its possessions? Stay, and do not be so irrational as to depart. Some such instruction should be given by the teacher to the youth with good natural abilities. But what happens now? A corpse is your teacher, and you are corpses. As soon as you have eaten your fill today, you sit lamenting about tomorrow, how you will be fed. Friend, if you understand this, you will have it. If you do not understand, you will leave. The door is open. Why be sad? Where is there still room for tears? Why should one person envy another? Why should they admire those who have great possessions or hold positions of power, especially if they are both strong and prone to anger? What harm can they do to us? We will not pay attention to what they have the power to do. As for the things we care about, they have no power over them. Who, then, will ever rule over a person who thinks this way? How did Socrates feel about these matters? Well, how else would a person feel who has been convinced that they are like the gods? If you tell me now, he says, we will acquit you on these conditions, namely, that you will no longer engage in these discussions which you have conducted until now, nor bother either the young or the old among us, I will answer. You make yourselves ridiculous by thinking that, if your general had assigned me to any post, I should hold and defend it and choose to die 10,000 times rather than abandon it. But if God has assigned us to a certain place and a certain way of life, we should abandon that. This is what it means for a person to truly be related to the gods. However, we think of ourselves as mere stomachs, organs, and genitals, just because we have fear, because we have desires, And we flatter those who have the power to help us in these matters, and we fear these same individuals. A certain person asked me to write to Rome on his behalf. He had experienced what most people consider misfortune. Although he had once been prominent and wealthy, he had lost everything and was now living here. I wrote a humble letter on his behalf. But when he read the letter, he handed it back to me and said, "I wanted your support, not your pity. My situation is not a bad one." Similarly, Rufus used to say, to test me, "Your master is going to do such and such a thing to you." And when I would respond, "It is just the fate of a human being," he would reply, "So what? Should I continue to plead with him when I can get the same result from you? Indeed, it is foolish and unnecessary to try to obtain from another person what one can get from oneself. Therefore, since I can achieve greatness of soul and nobility of character on my own, should I seek a farm, money, or some position from you? Far from it. I will not be so unaware of what I possess myself. But when a man is cowardly and lowly, what else can one possibly do but write letters on his behalf, as we do for a deceased person? Please grant us the body of so-and-so and a small amount of insignificant blood. Because truly, such a person is nothing more than a body and a small amount of insignificant blood. But if he were anything more, he would understand that another person does not cause one person's misfortune. Chapter 10 to those who aspire to gain favor in Rome. If we philosophers had dedicated ourselves to our own work as diligently as the elderly men in Rome have dedicated themselves to the matters they desire, perhaps we too would be achieving something. I know a man older than myself who now holds a position overseeing the grain supply in Rome. When he passed by this place on his way back from exile, I remember the story he told as he criticized his previous life and proclaimed that, in the future, he would devote the remaining years of his life to peace and tranquility, saying, "For how little time is left to me?" And I told him, "You will not do it, but once you catch even the slightest sin of Rome, you will forget all this." And if he were granted admission to the court, I added that he would rejoice, thank God, and push his way in. "If you find me, Epictetus," he said, setting foot inside the court, "think of me whatever you wish." Well, what did he do? Before he reached Rome, he received letters from Caesar, and as soon as he received them, he forgot all his resolutions, and ever since then, he has been accumulating one property after another. I wish I could stand by his side now and remind him of the words he spoke as he passed by here, and say, "I am a much better prophet than you." What then? Am I saying that humans are meant for inactivity? Far from it. But how can you say that we philosophers are not active in worldly affairs? For example, let us start with myself. As soon as the day begins, I quickly remind myself which author I must read. Then immediately I say to myself, "But does it really matter to me how so-and-so reads? The most important thing is that I get enough sleep." Similarly, how do the occupations of those other men compare to ours? If you observe what they do, you will see. Because what else do they do but spend the entire day doing calculations, arguing, consulting about a small amount of grain, a piece of land, or similar matters of profit? Is it then similar to receive a small request from someone that says, "I beg you to allow me to export a small quantity of grain," and compare it to this one, "I beseech you to learn from Chrysippus about the governance of the universe, and the role of the rational being within it, and also consider who you are, and the nature of your good and evil"? Are these two things alike? And do they require the same kind of study? And is it equally shameful to neglect one or the other? What then? Is it only us philosophers who take things lightly and doze off? No, it is you young men who do so much sooner. For, you see, us old men, when we witness young men playing, we are eager to join in the play ourselves. And even more so, if I were to see them awake and eager to partake in our studies, I would be eager to join them in their serious pursuits. Chapter 11 Family Affection. When an official came to visit him, Epictetus, after making some specific inquiries about other matters, asked him if he had children and a wife. When the official replied that he did, Epictetus asked another question. "What, then, is your experience with marriage?" The official responded, "Wretched." To which Epictetus asked, "How so?" "For men do not marry and have children with the intention of being miserable, but rather to be happy." The official then said, "And yet, I feel so miserable about my little children that recently, when my daughter was sick and in danger, I couldn't bear to stay by her bedside. I ran away until someone brought me news that she was well again." Epictetus questioned, "Do you believe you acted rightly in doing this?" The official replied, "I acted naturally." Epictetus countered, "But you must first convince me that you acted naturally, and then I will convince you that whatever is done in accordance with nature is done rightly." The official said, This is how most, if not all, fathers feel. Epictetus responded, I do not contradict you and say that it is not done, but the issue between us is whether it is done rightly. By your line of reasoning, we would have to say that tumors are produced for the good of the body simply because they occur. In short, we would have to say that to err is in accordance with nature just because most, if not all, of us err. Show me, therefore, how your conduct is in accordance with nature. The official admitted, I cannot, but you can show me how it is not in accordance with nature and not done rightly. Epictetus replied, well, if we were discussing white and black objects, what criterion should we use to distinguish between them? The official answered, sight. Epictetus continued, and if we were discussing hot and cold, and hard and soft objects, what criterion? The official replied, touch. Epictetus concluded, very well, since we are debating about things that are in accordance with nature and things that are done rightly or not, what criterion would you propose we use? The official admitted, I do not know. Epictetus then asked, and yet, although it may not be a great harm to be unaware of the criterion for colors, odors, and flavors, do you think it is a trivial matter for a person to be ignorant of the criterion for good and evil things? And for those in accordance with nature and those contrary to nature? The official responded, on the contrary, it is the greatest harm of all. Come, tell me, do all the things that certain people consider to be good and appropriate truly deserve such regard? And is it possible that all the opinions held by Jews, Syrians, Egyptians, and Romans regarding food are correct in this present time? And how could that be possible? But I suppose it is necessary that if the Egyptians' views are right, then the views of the others are not right. And if the views of the Jews are well-founded, then the views of the others are not. Yes, certainly. Now, where there is ignorance, there is also a lack of knowledge and instruction in essential matters. He agreed. Therefore, now that you understand this, you shall no longer study any other criterion than what is in accordance with nature. You shall apply that criterion and determine each specific case accordingly. But for now, I can assist you in achieving what you desire. Does family affection seem to you to be in accordance with nature and good? Of course. So, is it possible that while family affection is in accordance with nature and good, that which is reasonable is not good? By no means. Therefore, that which is reasonable is not incompatible with family affection, I believe. Otherwise, when two things are incompatible and one of them is in accordance with nature, the other must be contrary to nature, mustn't it? Even so, he said. Therefore, whatever we find to be both affectionate and reasonable at the same time, we confidently assert to be both right and good. Agreed, he said. What about this? I suppose you will not deny that leaving one's child when they are sick is at least not reasonable. But we still must consider whether it is affectionate. Yes, let us consider that. So, when you ran away and left your child, were you doing what was right since you were affectionately disposed towards her? And does the mother have no affection for her child? On the contrary, she has affection. Shouldn't the mother, then, have also left her child? No, she should not. What about the nurse? Does she love her child? She does, he said. Shouldn't she have left her child as well? By no means. And what about the school attendant? Doesn't he love the child? He does. Shouldn't he have gone away and left her too, so that the child would have been left alone and helpless due to the great affection of you, her parents, and those in charge of her? Or perhaps, have died in the arms of those who neither loved her nor cared for her? Far from it. And yet, isn't it unfair and unfeeling when a person thinks that certain behavior is fitting for themselves because of their affection, but they do not allow the same for others who have just as much affection as they do? That would be absurd. Come, if it were you who were sick, would you have wanted all your relatives, including your children and your wife, to show their affection in such a way that you would be left all alone and deserted by them? By no means. And would you have prayed to be so loved by your own family that, because of their excessive affection, you would always be left alone in sickness? Or would you, in this regard, have prayed to be loved by your enemies instead, if that were possible, so that you would be left alone by them? And if this is what you would have prayed for, then the only conclusion left for us is that your conduct was not an act of affection at all in the end. So, what was the motive that drove you to leave your child? And how can that be? But it was a motive like the one that compelled a man in Rome to cover his head when the horse he bet on was running. And when it unexpectedly won, they had to revive him from his faint with sponges. So, what motive is this? The scientific explanation may not be relevant now, but it is enough for us to understand that, according to philosophers, we should not look for the motive outside of ourselves. In all cases, it is one and the same thing that causes us to do or not do something, to say or not say something, to feel elated or cast down, to avoid or pursue things. It is the very thing that is currently causing my actions and yours. Yours, in coming to me and sitting here now listening, and mine, in saying these things. And what is that thing? Is it anything other than our desire to do this? Nothing. And if we had wanted to do something else, what else would we be doing? Surely, then, in Achilles' case, it was his desire to grieve that caused his sorrow, not the death of Patroclus, since other men do not react this way when their comrades die. And in your case the other day, the cause of your running away was simply that you wanted to do so. And another time, if you choose to stay with her, it will be because you wanted to stay. And now you are going back to Rome because you want to. And if you change your mind and want something else, you will not go. In short, it is not death, exile, toil, or anything of that sort that causes us to do or not do anything, but rather our opinions and the decisions of our will. Do I convince you of this, or not? You convince me, he said. Therefore, the causes of our actions are the same as the causes in each case. So, from this day forth, whenever we do something wrong, we will attribute it solely to the decision of our will that led us to do it. We will strive to eliminate and remove that cause more diligently than we try to remove tumors and abscesses from the body. And in the same way, we will declare that the decision of our will is the cause of our good actions. We will no longer blame slaves, neighbors, wives, or children as the causes of any evils that befall us. We are convinced that unless we decide that things are a certain way, we do not act accordingly. And we ourselves, not external things, are the masters of our decisions for or against something. Indeed, he said, from this very day, then, the thing we will investigate and examine will not be our farm, slaves, horses, or dogs, but only the decisions of our will. I hope so, he said. You see, then, that if you truly desire to examine the decisions of your own will, you must become a frequenter of the schools, the laughingstock of all men. And you know as well as I do that this is not the work of a single hour or day. Chapter 12, Contentment concerning Gods. There are some who say that the divine does not exist at all. Others say that it exists, but is inactive and indifferent, and does not take care of anything. A third group believes that it exists and takes care of great and heavenly things, but not earthly matters. A fourth group believes that it also takes care of earthly things and the affairs of humans, but only in a general way, not for everyone specifically. And a fifth group, to which Odysseus and Socrates belonged, believe that the gods exist and take care of everything. We must, therefore, first inquire about each of these statements to see if they are sound or not. If gods do not exist, how can it be an end to follow them? And if they do exist but do not care about anything, how can that conclusion be sound? But even if they exist and do care, if there is no communication from them to humans, including myself, how can our conclusion still be sound? The good and excellent person must, therefore, investigate all these things before submitting their own will to the one who administers the universe, just as good citizens obey the law of the state. And the person who is being instructed should approach their instruction with the aim of, how can I follow the gods in everything? How can I be acceptable to the divine administration? How can I become free? Because a person is free when everything happens according to their moral purpose, and no one can restrain them. So what? Is freedom insanity? Far from it. Madness and freedom are not consistent with each other. But I want what seems best to me to happen in every case, no matter how it seems. You are mad. You are out of your mind. Don't you know that freedom is a noble and precious thing? But for me to desire that things happen haphazardly, just because they seem best to me, is dangerously close to being not only ignoble but even extremely shameful. How do we act when we write? Do I desire to write the name Dio however I want? No, I am taught to desire to write it as it should be written. What do we do in music? The same. And in general, when there is any art or science, the same. Otherwise, knowledge of anything would be useless if it were tailored to each individual's whims. So, is it only in this matter of freedom, the greatest and highest of all, that I am allowed to desire haphazardly? By no means. Instruction consists precisely in learning to desire each thing exactly as it happens. And how do they happen? As the one who has ordained them has ordained. And he has ordained that there be summer and winter, and abundance and scarcity, and virtue and vice, and all such opposites, for the harmony of the whole. He has also given each of us a body, and body parts, and possessions, and companions. Therefore, aware of this ordaining, we should seek instruction not to change the nature of things, for this is neither granted to us nor is it preferable, but so that, with things around us being as they are and as their nature dictates, we may align our wills with what happens. You see, Can we escape from other people? And how is it possible? But can we change them if they associate with us? And who grants us that power? What other option remains, then, or what method can we find for living with them? A method such that, while they act in accordance with their own judgment, we can still live in harmony with nature. But you are impatient and irritable, and if you are alone, you call it solitude. But if you are in the company of others, you call them plotters and thieves, and you even find fault with your own parents, children, siblings, and neighbors. But when you are alone, you should consider it peace and freedom, and view yourself as like the gods. And when you are in the company of many, you should not call it a mob, or a commotion, or something repulsive, but rather a gathering and a celebration, and accept all things with contentment. So, what is the punishment for those who do not accept? To be just as they are. Is someone irritable because they are alone? Let them be in solitude. Are they irritable with their parents? Let them be a bad son and grieve. Are they irritable with their children? Let them be a bad parent. Throw them into prison. What kind of prison? The one they are already in. For they are there against their will, and wherever a person is against their will, which is a prison for them. Just as Socrates was not in prison, for he was there willingly. Alas, that I should have a lame leg. Slave, do you, then, blame the universe because of one insignificant leg? Will you not offer it freely to the whole? Will you not let it go? Will you not gladly surrender it to the giver? And will you be angry and irritable at the decrees of Zeus, which he established and ordained alongside the fates who spun the thread of your existence in his presence? Do you not know how small a part you are compared to the whole? That is, in terms of the body. As for reason, you are not inferior to the gods, nor are you lesser than them. For the greatness of reason is not determined by size or height, but by the choices of the will. Will you not, therefore, consider what is good for you and that which you share with the gods? I am a wretched man. My parents are terrible. But were you given the opportunity to choose your parents and the circumstances of your birth? No, you were not. Your parents existed first, and then you were born as you were. What kind of parents did you have? The kind that they were. So, what now? Since they're the way they are, is there no solution for you? Similarly, imagine if you did not know the purpose of having the ability to see. You would be unfortunate and miserable if you closed your eyes when someone showed you a color. But in your case, you have a great mind and noble qualities that you can use in any situation that may arise, yet you do not even realize it. Aren't you even more unfortunate and miserable? Opportunities that are appropriate for your abilities are presented to you, but you choose to ignore them when you should be paying attention. Shouldn't you be grateful to the gods for allowing you to be superior to things that are beyond your control, and for only holding you accountable for what is under your control? The gods have released you from accountability for your parents, siblings, body, possessions, death, and life. So, why are you accountable? The only thing that is under your control, how you use your impressions. So why do you burden yourself with things for which you are not responsible? This only causes trouble for yourself. Chapter 13. How can one do things that are pleasing to the gods? Someone asked him how to eat in a way that is pleasing to the gods. He replied, if you do it justly, kindly, fairly, moderately, and respectfully, wouldn't that also be pleasing to the gods? And what if you ask for warm water, but the slave does not listen to you? Or if he does listen but brings tepid water? Or if he is not even in the house? In these situations, refraining from anger and not exploding in rage, wouldn't that be pleasing to the gods? But how can one tolerate such people? Slave, can't you tolerate your own brother, who has Zeus as his father, and is like a son born from the same seed as you, from the same divine source? But if you have been given a position of authority over others, will you immediately become a tyrant? Don't you remember who you are and who you rule over? They are your relatives, your brothers by nature, and the offspring of Zeus. But I have documents proving that they are my slaves, and they don't have any documents proving that I am their master. Do you see where your focus lies? It is on earthly matters, on our flawed laws, and not on the laws of the gods. Chapter 14. The deity watches over all men. Someone asked him how one can be convinced that everything they do is observed by God. He responded, don't you think that everything is interconnected? The person agreed. Well, don't you think that what happens on earth is influenced by what happens in heaven? The philosopher asked. The person agreed. Then how else can you explain the regularity with which plants flower, grow, bear fruit, and go through their natural cycles, as if following God's command? And how else can you explain the changes we see on earth during the waxing and waning of the moon and the movement of the sun? But if plants and our bodies are so intricately connected to the universe and share its influences, isn't this even more true for our souls? If our souls are so intertwined with God and united with Him as parts of His being, then doesn't God perceive every motion of our souls as His own motion, as if we are one with Him? And yet, you could think about divine matters and human affairs simultaneously. You can be affected by countless things in your senses and intelligence, and you can agree with some and disagree with others, or suspend judgment. You hold impressions from various matters in your soul, and when moved by these impressions, your mind generates corresponding thoughts. From countless matters, you acquire and retain knowledge, one after another, and memories. You do all of this, but isn't God capable of overseeing everything, being present with all, and having a certain communication with all? Yet the sun can illuminate such a large portion of the universe, leaving only a small space unilluminated by the shadow cast by the earth. And if God created the sun, which is only a small part of Himself compared to the whole, and causes it to revolve, isn't He able to perceive all things? And yet, someone might say, I cannot follow all these things at once. But has anyone ever told you that you possess a faculty equal to that of Zeus? Nevertheless, each person has been assigned their own guardian genius by God, who never sleeps and cannot be deceived. For who else could be a better and more careful guardian for each of us? Therefore, when you close your doors and create darkness within, never say that you are alone, because you are not alone. God is within, and your own genius is within. And do they need light to see what you're doing? Yes, you should also swear allegiance to this God, just as soldiers swear allegiance to Caesar. They are mere mercenaries, yet they swear to prioritize Caesar's safety above everything else. And you, who have been deemed worthy of numerous and great blessings, will you be unwilling to swear? Or, once you have sworn, will you not abide by your oath? And what will you swear to? Never to disobey under any circumstances, never to make accusations, never to find fault with anything that God has given, never to let your will rebel when you must do or suffer something that is inevitable. Can the soldier's oath be compared in any way to ours? Out there, men swear never to prioritize anyone above Caesar in honor, but here we swear to prioritize ourselves in honor above everything else. Chapter 15. What does philosophy claim to achieve? When someone asked Epictetus how he could persuade his brother to stop being angry with him, he replied, philosophy does not claim to secure any external possessions for man. Otherwise, it would be undertaking something that is beyond its proper subject matter. Just as wood is the material for the carpenter and bronze is the material for the sculptor, each person's own life is the subject matter of the art of living. Well, what about my brother's life? That, again, falls under the subject matter of his own art of living, but in relation to your own art of living, it falls under the category of external things, like a farm, like health, like a good reputation. Philosophy does not promise any of these things, but rather, it promises to keep the governing principle in accordance with nature in every situation. Whose governing principle? The governing principle of the person I am. So, how can I prevent my brother from getting angry at me? Bring him to me and I will explain, but I have nothing to say to you regarding his anger. Then, the man who was seeking advice asked, what I want to know is, even if my brother refuses to reconcile with me, how can I still be in harmony with nature? Epictetus replied, great things do not happen all at once, not even the growth of grapes or figs. If you say to me now, I want a fig, I will reply, that takes time. Let the tree blossom first, then bear fruit, and finally let the fruit ripen. Even the fruit of a fig tree does not reach perfection suddenly and in a single hour. So why do you expect to achieve the fruit of a person's mind in such a short time and with such ease? Do not expect it, even if I were to tell you so myself. Chapter 16. Providence. Do not be surprised that animals other than humans are provided with what they need for their bodies by nature, not just food and drink, but also a place to rest. They have no need for shoes, bedding, or clothing, while we need all these things. This is because animals are not born for their own sake, but for service. It would not be beneficial to create them in need of other things. Just imagine if we had to take care not only of ourselves, but also of our sheep and donkeys, how they would be clothed, shod, and fed. But just as soldiers appear before their commander fully prepared for service, with shoes, clothing, and weapons, it would be absurd if the colonel had to go around equipping his regiment with shoes or uniforms. Similarly, nature has made animals, which are born to serve, ready to be used, equipped, and in no need of further attention. Therefore, a small child with a rod can easily drive a flock of sheep. However, we fail to give thanks for these animals because we do not have to care for them as much as we do for ourselves. Instead, we complain against God for our own sake. Yet, by Zeus and the gods, Even a single gift of nature would be enough to make a reverent and grateful person recognize the providence of God. Let us not talk about grand matters now. Let us consider the simple fact that milk is produced from grass, cheese from milk, and wool from skin. Who is it that has created or devised these things? No one, somebody says. Oh, the depth of man's stupidity and shamelessness. Come, let us leave the main works of nature and consider only what she does incidentally. Can anything be more useless than the hairs on a chin? Well, what then? Has not nature used even these in the most suitable way possible? Has she not, by these means, distinguished between males and females? Does not the nature of each one among us cry aloud immediately from afar, I am a man. Approach me with this understanding, talk with me with this understanding, ask for nothing more, behold the signs? Similarly, in the case of women, just as nature has mixed a certain softer note into their voices, she has also removed the hair from their chins. Not so, you say. On the contrary, the human being should have been left without distinguishing features, and each of us should proclaim verbally, I am a man. No, but how fair and fitting and dignified the sign is. How much fairer than the rooster's comb, how much more magnificent than the lion's mane. Therefore, we should preserve the signs that God has given. We should not discard them. We should not, as far as we can, confuse the genders that have been distinguished in this way. Are these the only works of providence in us? No. What language is sufficient to praise them all or to fully appreciate them? Why, if we were sensible, should we be doing anything else, publicly and privately, other than praising and extolling the deity and recounting his blessings? Should we not, as we dig, plow, and eat, sing a hymn of praise to God? Great is God, who has provided us with these tools with which we shall cultivate the earth. Great is God, who has given us hands and the ability to swallow, and a belly, and the ability to grow unconsciously, and to breathe while asleep. This is what we should sing on every occasion, and above all, sing the greatest and most divine hymn, that God has given us the faculty to comprehend these things and to follow the path of reason. What then? Since most of you have become blind, should there not be someone to fulfill this duty for you, and on behalf of all, sing the hymn of praise to God? Why, what else can I, a disabled old man, do but sing hymns to God? If, indeed, I were a nightingale, I would sing like a nightingale, if a swan, like a swan. But as it is, I am a rational being, therefore I must sing hymns of praise to God. This is my task. I do it, and will not abandon this position if it may be given to me to fulfill it, and I urge you to join me in this same song. Chapter 17. That the art of reasoning is essential. Since it is reason that analyzes and improves everything else, and reason itself should not remain unanalyzed, how shall it be analyzed? Either by itself or by something else. This latter is surely either reason, or it will prove to be something else superior to reason, which is impossible. If it is reason, who again will analyze that reason? For if it analyzes itself, the reason with which we started can do the same. If we require something else at each step, our process will be endless and continuous. Yes, someone says, but the cure of the decisions of our will is a much more urgent need than the study of logic, and so on. Do you then want to hear about this other matter? Very well, listen. But if you say to me, I do not know whether your argument is true or false, and if I use some ambiguous term, and you should then say, distinguish, I will bear with you no longer, but will tell you, no, but there is a much more urgent need. This is the reason, I suppose, why the Stoic philosophers put logic first, just as in the measuring of grain we put the examination of the measure first. And if we do not define first what a modius is, and do not define first what a scale is, how will we be able to proceed with measuring or weighing anything? So, in the field of our present inquiry, if we have neglected the thorough knowledge and intellectual mastery of our standard of judgment for all other things, whereby they come to be known thoroughly, will we ever be able to attain intellectual mastery and thorough knowledge of the rest of the world? And how could we possibly? Yes, we are told, but the modius is made out of wood and bears no fruit. True, but it is something with which we can measure grain. Logic also bears no fruit. Now as for this statement we shall see later, but if one should grant even this, it is enough to say in defense of logic that it has the power to discriminate and examine everything else, and, as one might say, to measure and weigh them. Who says this? Only Chrysippus and Zeno and Cleanthes? Well, does not Antisthenes say it? And who is it that wrote, the beginning of education is the examination of terms? Does not Socrates, too, say the same thing? And of whom does Xenophon write that he began with the examination of terms, asking about each, what does it mean? Is this, then, your great and admirable achievement, The ability to understand and interpret Chrysippus? And who says that? What, then, is your admirable achievement? To understand the will of nature. Very well. Do you understand it all by yourself? And if that is the case, what more do you need? For if it is true that all men err involuntarily, and you have learned the truth, it must be that you are doing right already. But, by Zeus, I do not comprehend the will of nature. Who, then, interprets it? Men say, Chrysippus. I go and try to understand what this interpreter of nature is saying. I start to have trouble comprehending his words and seek out someone who can explain them to me. Look and consider the meaning of this passage, says the interpreter, as if it were in a foreign language. In that case, where is the justification for the interpreter's pride? In fact, there is no valid reason for pride, even in the case of Chrysippus, if he merely interprets the will of nature without following it. So there is even less reason for pride in the case of his interpreter. We do not need Chrysippus for his own sake, but only to help us follow nature. Similarly, we do not need the diviner for his own sake, but only because we believe that through him, we can understand the future and the signs given by the gods. We do not value the intrals themselves, but rather God, who communicates his signs through them. Therefore, I approach this interpreter and diviner and ask, examine the intrals for me and tell me what signs they reveal. The man takes the intrals, spreads them out, and then interprets. Man, you possess a moral purpose that is naturally free from obstacles and constraints. This is clearly written here in these intrals. Let me first prove this in the realm of assent. Can anyone prevent you from agreeing with the truth? Absolutely not. Can anyone force you to accept falsehood? Absolutely not. Do you see that in this realm, your moral purpose is free from hindrance, constraint, and obstruction? Now, let us consider the realm of desire and choice. Is it any different? What can overcome one impulse except another impulse? What can overcome one desire or aversion except another desire or aversion? But someone objects, if someone subjects me to the fear of death, they compel me. No, it is not the external circumstances that compel you, but rather your own decision that it is preferable to do something of that nature than to die. Once again, it is your own will that compels you, meaning that one moral purpose compels another moral purpose. For if God had created that part of his own essence, which he has bestowed upon us, in such a way that it could be hindered or constrained by himself or any other force, then he would no longer be God, nor would he be fulfilling his duty of caring for us. This is what I have discovered, says the diviner, through the sacrifice. These are the signs that have been revealed to you. If you choose to, you are free. If you choose to, you will have no one to blame or complain against. Everything will align with not only your will, but also the will of God. This is the prophecy for which I consult this diviner, or in other words, philosopher, not because I admire him for his interpretation, but rather for the interpretation itself that he provides. Chapter 18. That we should not be angry with the erring. If what the philosophers say is true, that in all men thought and action originate from a single source, namely feeling, as in the case of agreement, the feeling that something is true, and in the case of disagreement, the feeling that it is not true, and, by the way, in the case of uncertainty, the feeling that it is unsure, so also in the case of desire for something, the feeling that it is beneficial for me and that it is impossible to deem one thing beneficial and yet desire another, and, furthermore, to deem one thing appropriate and yet be compelled towards another. If all this is indeed true, why are we still angry with the majority? They are thieves, someone says, and robbers. What do you mean by thieves and robbers? They have simply gone astray in matters of good and evil. Should we, therefore, be angry with them, or rather pity them? Just show them their mistake, and you will see how quickly they will cease their errors. But if their eyes are not opened, they have nothing beyond their mere opinion. Shouldn't this bandit, then, and this adulterer be put to death? You ask. Not at all, but you should ask instead, shouldn't this person be put to death who is in a state of error and delusion about the most important matters, and is in a state of blindness, not in the physical vision that distinguishes between white and black, but in the judgment that distinguishes between good and evil? And if you put it this way, you will realize how inhumane a sentiment you are expressing, and that it is just as if you were to say, shouldn't this blind man, then, or this deaf man be put to death? For if the loss of the greatest things is the greatest harm that can befall a person, while the greatest thing in each person is a right moral purpose, and if a person is deprived of this very thing, what reason is there for you to be angry at them? Why, my friend, if you must be affected in a way that goes against nature by the misfortunes of another, pity them instead, but do not hate them. Abandon this readiness to take offense and this spirit of hatred. Do not use those words that the judgmental masses use. Well, then, these cursed and detestable fools. Very well, but how is it that you have suddenly become wise and now you are angry at fools? So, why are we angry? Because we admire the possessions that these people steal from us. You see, if you stop admiring your clothes, you will not be angry at the person who steals them. If you stop admiring your wife's beauty, you will not be angry at her adulterer. Understand that a thief or an adulterer has no place among the things that belong to you, but only among the things that belong to someone else and are beyond your control. If you give up these things and consider them insignificant, who do you have a reason to be angry with? But if you admire these things, be angry at yourself and not at the men I just mentioned. Think about it. You have nice clothes and your neighbor does not. You have a window and want to show them off. Your neighbor does not understand what truly makes a person good, but believes that it lies in having nice clothes, which is the same belief you hold. Shouldn't he then take them? Why, when you show a cake to greedy people and then eat it all by yourself, don't you want them to snatch it? Stop provoking them. Stop having a window. Stop showing off your clothes. Something similar happened to me the other day. I keep an iron lamp next to my household gods, and when I heard a noise at the window, I rushed downstairs. I found that the lamp had been stolen. I realized that the person who stole it had a reasonable motive. So what? Tomorrow, I say, you will find one made of clay. After all, a person only loses what they already have. I have lost my cloak. Yes, because you had a cloak. I have a headache. You do not have horns on your head, do you? So why are you angry? Because our losses and pains only have to do with the things we possess. But the tyrant will chain, what? Your leg. But he will cut off, what? Your neck. So, what won't he chain or cut off? Your moral purpose. That is why the ancients gave us the command, know thyself. What comes next? Well, by the gods, one should practice with small things and then move on to greater ones. I have a headache. Well, do not say, oh no. I have an earache. Do not say, oh no. And I am not saying that it is not okay to groan, just do not groan in the depths of your being. And if your slave is slow in bringing your bandage, do not shout and make a face and say, everybody hates me. Well, who would not hate such a person? In the future, have faith in these principles and walk confidently, free, without relying on the size of your body, like an athlete, because you should not be invincible in the way an ass is invincible. So, who is the invincible person? The one who cannot be discouraged by anything outside the realm of their moral purpose. Then, I proceed to consider the circumstances one by one, just as I would do in the case of an athlete. This person won the first round. What will they do in the second? What if it is scorching hot? And what will they do at Olympia? It is the same way with the situation we are discussing. If you place a small amount of money in a person's path, they will disregard it. Yes, but what if you place a woman in his path? Or if it is in the darkness, what then? Or if you present him with a bit of reputation, what then? Or abuse, what then? Or praise, what then? Or death, what then? All these things he can overcome. What if it is scorching hot, that is? What if he is intoxicated? What if he is melancholy or insane? What if he is asleep? The person who passes all these tests is what I mean by the invincible athlete. Chapter 19. How should we behave towards tyrants? If a person possesses some kind of superiority or believes that they do, even if they do not, it is inevitable that this person, if they are uneducated, becomes arrogant because of it. For instance, the tyrant proclaims, I am the most powerful in the world. Very well, what can you do for me? Can you ensure that I have desires that are free from any hindrance? How can you? Do you have it yourself? Can you ensure that I have aversions that are immune to encountering what they seek to avoid? Do you have it yourself? Or infallible choice? And where can you claim a share in that? Come, when you are on board a ship, do you have confidence in yourself? Or in the skilled navigator? And when you are in a chariot, in whom do you have confidence other than the skilled driver? And how is it in the other arts? The same way. What does your power amount to then? All men pay attention to me. Yes, and I pay attention to my small plate and clean it, and for the sake of my oil flask, I hang it on a peg on the wall. What follows, then? Are these things superior to me? No, but they serve me in some way, and therefore I pay attention to them. Again, do not I pay attention to my donkey? Don't I wash its feet? Don't I groom it? Don't you know that every person pays attention to themselves, and to you just as they do to their donkey? For who pays attention to you as they do to a person? Show him to me. Who wants to become like you? Who becomes an enthusiastic follower of yours as people did of Socrates? But I can cut off your head. Well said. I had forgotten that I should pay attention to you, like I would to a fever or cholera. and set up an altar to you, just as there is an altar to the god Fever in Rome. What is it, then, that disturbs and confuses the masses? Is it the tyrant and his bodyguards? How is that possible? No, far from it. It is not possible for something that is naturally free to be disturbed or hindered by anything other than itself. It is a person's own judgments that disturb them. When a tyrant threatens a man by saying, "I will chain your leg," the man who values his leg highly responds, "Please have mercy on me." On the other hand, the man who values his moral purpose highly replies, "If you believe it to be more advantageous, go ahead and chain it. Don't you care?" No, I do not care. I will show you that I am your master. How can you be my master? Zeus has set me free. Or do you genuinely think that he would allow his own son to be enslaved? However, you are the master of my lifeless body. Take it. So, you mean that when you approach me, you will not pay any attention to me? No, I only pay attention to myself. But if you desire me to say that I also pay attention to you, then I tell you that I do, but only as much as I pay attention to my cooking pot. This is not mere self-love, such is the nature of the human being. Everything that he does is for himself. Even the sun does everything for its own sake, and the same goes for Zeus himself. However, when Zeus wishes to be the bringer of rain, the giver of fruit, and the father of men and gods, you can see for yourself that he cannot accomplish these tasks or earn these titles unless he proves himself useful to the common interest. In general, Zeus has created the nature of the rational human being in such a way that they can achieve nothing of their own proper goods unless they contribute something to the common interest. Therefore, it can no longer be considered unsocial for a person to do everything for their own sake. What do you expect? Should a person neglect themselves and their own interests? In that case, how can there be room for one principle of action for all, which is the appropriation of their own needs? So, what happens then? When people hold absurd opinions about matters beyond the realm of moral purpose, considering them to be good or bad, it is inevitable for them to pay attention to the tyrant. Oh, if only it were just the tyrants and not their servants as well. And yet, how can a person suddenly become wise when Caesar appoints them as the supervisor of his chamber pot? How can we immediately say, "Felicio has spoken wisely to me"? I wish he were removed from the position of overseeing the dung heap, so that you may consider him a fool once again. Epictetus once owned a certain cobbler whom he sold because he was useless. Then, by some chance, the fellow was purchased by a member of Caesar's household and became Caesar's cobbler. You should have seen how Epictetus honored him. He used to say, "How's my good Felicio? I pray." And if someone asked us, "What is your master doing?" we would be told, "He is consulting Felicio about something or other." But didn't Epictetus sell him because he was useless? Who then suddenly made him wise? This is what it means to honor something other than what falls within the realm of moral purpose. He has been honored with a position of power, someone says. Everyone who meets him congratulates him. One man kisses him on the eyes, another on the neck. His slaves kiss his hands. He goes home. He finds lamps being lit. He climbs up the Capitol and offers a sacrifice. Now, whoever gave thanks for having desired what is right, or for having made choices in accordance with nature, because we give thanks to the gods for what we consider good. Today, someone was talking to me about a role in the priesthood of Augustus. I say to him, "Man, forget about it. You will be spending a lot of money for no reason." But he says, "Those who draft legal documents will write my name." Do you really expect to be present when the documents are read and say, "That is my name they have written"? And even if you can be present whenever anyone reads them now, what will you do if you die? My name will live on after me. Write it on a stone, and it will live on after you. Come on now, who will remember you outside of Nicopolis? But I will wear a crown made of gold. If you want a crown at all, wear a crown made of roses. You will look much more elegant in that. Chapter 20: How the reasoning faculty contemplates itself. Every art and skill focus on certain things for its contemplation. When the art or skill itself is of the same kind as what it contemplates, it naturally becomes self-reflective. But when it is of a different kind, it cannot reflect upon itself. For example, the art of leatherworking deals with hides, but the art itself is completely different from the material of hides, so it cannot reflect upon itself. Similarly, the art of grammar deals with written speech. Therefore, it is not written speech itself. Thus, it cannot reflect upon itself. So, for what purpose has nature given us reason? For the proper use of external experiences. Then, what is reason itself? It is something formed from a certain kind of external experiences. Therefore, it naturally becomes self-reflective. Once again, what are the things that wisdom is meant to contemplate? Things that are good, bad, and neither good nor bad. Then, what is wisdom itself? It is a good. And what is folly? It is an evil. Do you see, then, that wisdom inevitably contemplates both itself and its opposite? Therefore, the first and most important task of the philosopher is to examine and distinguish between impressions, and to only accept those that have been examined. You all see how in the matter of currency, which is something we have an interest in, we have even invented a skill, and how many methods the tester uses to examine the currency: sight, touch, smell, and finally, hearing. They even throw the coin down and listen to the sound it makes, and they are not satisfied with just one test. Through constant attention to the matter, they learn to recognize the sound, like a musician. Thus, when we feel that it makes a significant difference to us whether we make a mistake or not, we pay close attention to distinguishing between things that can lead us astray. However, when it comes to our guiding principle, we neglect it and accept any external impression without question. We fail to recognize the loss we suffer in doing so. If you want to understand how little you care about good and evil and how much you care about what is indifferent, consider how you feel about physical blindness compared to mental delusion. You will realize that you do not prioritize good and evil as you should. But this requires a lot of preparation, hard work, and learning. You might say, well, what of it? Do you expect to acquire the greatest art with minimal effort? Yet, the main teachings of philosophers are concise. If you want to know, read what Zeno has to say. His statement is not lengthy. To follow the gods is the purpose of man, and the essence of good is the proper use of external impressions. If you ask about the nature of God, external impressions, individual nature, and universal nature, then the explanation becomes lengthy. But even then, it is not likely that the good of a snail lies in its shell. So is it probable that the good of man lies in his flesh? Epicurus, consider your own case. What superior faculty do you possess? What within you takes counsel, examines everything, and determines that the flesh is the most important matter? Why do you put in so much effort to enlighten us and write so many books? Is it so that we may know the truth? Who are we to you? And why do you seek our admiration? The argument becomes lengthy. Chapter 21. To those who seek admiration. When a person is in their rightful place in life, they are not desperately seeking recognition beyond it. What is it that you want to happen to you? As for me, I am content if I desire and avoid in accordance with nature, if I make choices and refusals as my nature dictates, and if I use intention, purpose, and agreement in the same way. So why do you act as if you are superior when you are in our presence? I have always wished for those who meet me to admire me and proclaim, "Oh, the great philosopher." Who are these people that you want to admire you? Aren't they the same ones you often refer to as mad? So, do you want to be admired by the mad? Chapter 22, on our assumptions. Assumptions are common to all people, and one assumption does not contradict another. For whom among us does not assume that what is good is profitable and something to be chosen, and that in every circumstance we should seek and pursue it? And who among us does not assume that righteousness is beautiful and fitting? So, when does contradiction arise? It arises when we apply our preconceptions to specific cases, when one person says, he acted nobly, he is brave, and another says, no, but he is out of his mind. This is where conflicts between people arise. This is the conflict between Jews and Syrians, Egyptians and Romans, not over whether holiness should be prioritized above all else and pursued in all circumstances, but over whether the specific act of eating swine's flesh is holy or unholy. You will find that this was also the cause of conflict between Agamemnon and Achilles. Let us summon them before us. What do you say, Agamemnon? Shouldn't what is proper and noble be done? Indeed, it should. And what do you say, Achilles? Don't you agree that what is noble should be done? I emphatically agree with that principle. Very well, then, let us apply our preconceptions to specific cases. It is there that conflicts arise. One person says, I should not be compelled to give back Chryses to her father, while the other says, indeed you should. Certainly, one of them is misapplying the preconception of what one should do. Furthermore, one of them says, if I should give back Chryses, then I should take from one of you the prize he has won, and the other replies, would you then take the woman I love? Yes, the woman you love, the first person answers. Shall I then be the only one? But shall I be the only one to have nothing? And so, a conflict arises. So, what does it mean to receive an education? It means to learn how to apply our natural preconceptions to specific cases, in accordance with nature, and to also make the distinction that some things are under our control while others are not. Moral purpose and all acts of moral purpose are under our control, but the body, its parts, possessions, parents, siblings, children, country, in short, everything we associate with is not under our control. So where should we place the good? To which category of things should we apply it? To the category of things that are under our control. But isn't health a good thing? And a healthy body and life? And even children, parents, and country? And who will agree with you if you deny that? Therefore, let us assign the label good to these things. But is it possible for a person to be happy if they experience harm and fail to obtain what is good? It is not possible. And to maintain proper relationships with their associates? How can that be possible? For it is in my nature to look out for my own interest. If I desire to have a farm, it is in my best interest to acquire it from my neighbor. If I desire to have a cloak, it is also in my best interest to steal it from a bath. This is the root cause of wars, rebellions, oppressive rulers, and conspiracies. Furthermore, how can I fulfill my duty towards Zeus? If I suffer harm and misfortune, he pays no attention to me. And then we hear people saying, what use is he if he is unable to assist us? And again, what use is he if he wills for me to be in my current state? The next step is that I begin to despise him. So why do we construct temples for the gods and create statues of them, as if they were malevolent spirits? Why should Zeus still be considered a savior, bringer of rain, and provider of fruits? If we place the concept of good within this realm, all these consequences follow. So, what should we do? This is a matter for inquiry for the person who truly philosophizes and ponders deeply. Such an individual says to themselves, I do not currently perceive what is good and what is evil. Am I not insane? Yes, but suppose I place the good within the realm of things that they will control. Everyone will ridicule me. An elderly man with white hair and many gold rings on his fingers will come by, shake his head, and say, listen to me, my son, it is certainly important to philosophize, but one must also keep a clear mind. This is all nonsense. You may learn a logical argument from philosophers, but you know better than philosophers what you should do. Man, then why do you criticize me if I know? What should I say to this servant? If I remain silent, he becomes furious. So, I must say, forgive me as you would forgive lovers. I am not in control of myself. I am insane. Chapter 23 in response to Epicurus. Even Epicurus acknowledges that we are inherently social beings. However, once he establishes that our good lies within the external things we possess, he cannot proceed to say anything that contradicts this. He strongly emphasizes the principle that we should neither admire nor accept anything that is disconnected from the nature of the good, and he is correct in doing so. But then, how can we still be social beings if affection for our own children is not a natural sentiment? Why do you discourage the wise person from raising children? Why do you fear that they will experience sorrow because of them? Does sorrow not arise from the presence of a house slave named Mouse? Well, what does it matter if his little mouse in his home starts to cry? No, he understands that once a child is born, it is no longer within our power to not love or care for them. For the same reason, Epicurus says that a sensible person does not engage in politics either. They understand what a person involved in politics must do. If you are going to live among people as if you were a fly among flies, what is stopping you? Despite knowing this, they still have the audacity to say, let us not have children. But a sheep does not abandon its own offspring, nor does a wolf. So why would a person abandon theirs? What do you want us to do? Do you want us to be as foolish as sheep? Even they do not desert their offspring. Do you want us to be as fierce as wolves? Even they do not desert their offspring. Come now, who follows your advice when they see their child fallen on the ground and crying? In my opinion, even if your mother and father had known that you were going to say such things, they would not have exposed you. Chapter 24. How should we overcome difficulties? It is difficulties that reveal a person's true character. Therefore, when faced with a difficulty, remember that God, like a physical trainer, has matched you with a strong young man. Why, you may ask? So that you may become an Olympic victor, but that cannot be achieved without hard work. In my opinion, you have been given a great difficulty, if only you are willing to face it head-on like an athlete wrestling with a young man. And now we are sending you to Rome as a scout, to gather information about the land. But no one sends a coward as a scout, someone who would run back in terror at the slightest noise or shadow, exclaiming, the enemy is already upon us. Similarly, if you were to come back and tell us, the situation in Rome is terrifying. Death is terrible, exile is terrible, insults are terrible, poverty is terrible. Run away, everyone, the enemy is coming. We would say to you, go and prophesy to yourself. Our only mistake was sending someone like you as a scout. Diogenes, who was sent as a scout before you, has brought us back a different report. He says, death is not an evil, as it is not dishonorable. He says, negative reputation is just noise made by madmen. And what a report this scout has given us about hard work, pleasure, and poverty. He says, being naked is better than wearing any fancy robe, and sleeping on the bare ground is the most comfortable bed. And he offers his own courage, tranquility, freedom, and his healthy and strong body as proof of each statement. There is no enemy nearby, he says. Everything is peaceful. How is that possible, Diogenes? Well, look, he says. Have I been hit by any projectiles or received any wounds? Have I run away from anyone? That is what it means to be a proper scout. But you come back and tell us one thing after another. Will you not go away again and observe more accurately without this cowardice? What am I supposed to do, then? What do you do when you disembark from a ship? You do not pick up the rudder, do you, or the oars? What do you pick up, then? Your own luggage, your oil flask, your wallet. So now, if you are mindful of what is your own property, you will never lay claim to that which belongs to someone else. He says to you, lay aside your broad scarlet hem. Behold, the narrow hem. Lay aside this also. Behold, the plain toga. Lay aside your toga. Behold, I am naked. But you arouse my envy. Well, then, take my whole insignificant body. Do I still fear the man to whom I can throw my body? But he will not leave me as his heir. What then? Did I forget that none of these things is truly mine? How then do we call them my own? Merely as we call the bed in the inn my own. If then the innkeeper dies and leaves you the beds, you will have them. But if he leaves them to someone else, he will have them, and you will look for another bed. If then you do not find one, you will have to sleep on the ground. Only do so with good courage, snoring and remembering that tragedies find a place among the rich and among kings and tyrants. But no poor man fills a tragic role except as a member of the chorus. Now the kings commence in a state of prosperity. Hang the palace with garlands, then, about the third or fourth act, comes, alas, Cytheron, why did you receive me? Slave, where are your crowns, where your diadem? Do your guards avail you not at all? When, therefore, you approach one of those great men, remember all this, that you are approaching a tragic character, not the actor, but Oedipus himself. Nay, but so-and-so is blessed, for he has many companions to walk with. So do I. I fall in line with the multitude and have many companions to walk with. But, to sum it all up, remember that the door has been thrown open. Do not become a greater coward than the children, but just as they say, I won't play any longer, when the thing does not please them, so do you also, when things seem to have reached that stage, merely say, I won't play any longer, and take your departure. But if you stay, stop lamenting. Chapter 25 upon the same theme. If all this is true, and we are not foolish nor merely pretending when we say, man's good and man's evil lies in moral choice, and all other things are nothing to us, why are we still distressed and afraid? Over the things that we genuinely care for, no one has authority, and the things over which other men have authority do not concern us. What else do we have to discuss? No, give me instructions. What instructions should I give you? Hasn't Zeus given you instructions? Hasn't he given you what is rightfully yours, without obstacles or limitations, while what is not yours is subject to hindrance and restraint? So, what instructions did you bring with you when you entered this world from him? What kind of order? Protect with all means that which belongs to you, but do not covet what belongs to others. Your loyalty is yours. Your self-respect is yours. Then, who can take these things away from you? Who, other than yourself, will prevent you from using them? But how do you act? When you earnestly seek what is not yours, you lose what is yours. Since you have such promptings and instructions from Zeus, what kind do you still desire from me? Am I greater than him or more trustworthy? But if you follow his commands, do you need any others? Hasn't he already given you these instructions? Present your preconceptions, present the demonstrations of the philosophers, present what you have often heard, and present what you have said yourself, present what you have read, present what you have practiced. So, how long should we keep these principles without breaking the game? If it is played pleasantly. During the Saturnalia, a king is chosen by chance, for it has been decided to play this game. The king gives his commands. You drink, you mix wine, you sing, you go, you come. I obey, so as not to be the one to break the game. Come, suppose that you are in an unfortunate situation. I do not suppose so, and who is there to compel me to suppose so? Again, we have agreed to play the story of Agamemnon and Achilles. The one who has been appointed to play the role of Agamemnon tells me, go to Achilles and take Briseis away. I go. He says, come, and I come. For as we behave in the matter of hypothetical proposals, so we should behave in life as well. Let it be night. So be it. Then, Is it day? No, because I have accepted the assumption that it is night. Let's suppose that you assume it to be night. So be it. But keep assuming that it is night. That is not consistent with the hypothesis. The same applies in the present case. Let's suppose that you are unhappy. So be it. Are you then unfortunate? Yes. Then, are you troubled with misfortune? Yes. But keep assuming that you are in a wretched situation. That is not consistent with the hypothesis. Moreover, there is another who forbids me from thinking so. So, how long should we obey such commands? If it is beneficial, and that means if I maintain what is appropriate and consistent. Furthermore, some people are unnecessarily grumpy and have sharp tongues. They say, I can't have dinner at this person's house, where I have to endure him telling the same story every day about how he fought in Misha. I have already told you, brother, how I climbed up to the top of the hill. Well, now I feel besieged once again. But another person says, I'd rather have dinner and listen to him babble as much as he wants. It is up to you to compare these opinions. Just do not act as if you're burdened or afflicted or think that you're in a miserable situation because no one is forcing you to feel that way. Has someone created smoke in the house? If they have created a moderate amount of smoke, I will stay. If it is too much, I'll go outside. You should remember and hold on to this. The door is open. But someone says, don't live in Nicopolis. I agree not to live there. Nor in Athens. I agree not to live in Athens either. Nor in Rome. I agree not to live in Rome either. Live in Gyra. I agree to live there. But living in Gyra seems to me like having a lot of smoke in the house. I will go to a place where no one will stop me from living because that place is open to everyone. And as for my body, which is like the last layer of clothing, no one has authority over me beyond that. That is why Demetrius said to Nero, you threaten me with death, but nature threatens you. If I admire my own body, I have revealed myself as a slave. If I admire my own possessions, I have revealed myself as a slave too because I have shown what can trap me. Just like when a snake pulls its head back, I say, strike the part that it's protecting. So be sure that your master will attack you in the area you are trying to protect the most. If you remember all of this, whom will you flatter or fear anymore? But I want to sit where the senators sit. Do you realize that you are putting yourself in a tight spot? You are crowding yourself. How else can I have a good view in the amphitheater then? Man, do not become a spectator, and you will not be crowded. Why are you causing trouble for yourself? Or wait a little while, and when the show is over, sit among the seats of the senators and enjoy the sun. In general, remember this. We crowd ourselves, we put ourselves in tight spots. That is to say, the decisions we make crowd us and put us in tight spots. Now, what about being insulted? Stand next to a stone and insult it. What effect will you have? If a person listens like a stone, what benefit does the insulter gain? But if the insulter takes advantage of the weakness of the insulted, then they do achieve something. Take off his clothes. Why do you tell him? Take his cloak and strip that off. I have offended you. It will not do you any good. This is what Socrates practiced, and that is why he always wore the same expression on his face. But we prefer to practice and rehearse anything rather than how to be unrestricted and free. The philosophers taught paradoxes, you say. But aren't there paradoxes in other fields as well? And what is more paradoxical than to stab a man in the eye so that he may see? If anyone said this to a man who was inexperienced in the art of surgery, wouldn't he laugh at the speaker? What is there to be surprised at then, if in philosophy also many things that are true appear paradoxical to the inexperienced? Chapter 26 What is the rule of life? As someone was reading the hypothetical arguments, Epictetus said, this is also a law governing hypotheses, that we must accept what the hypothesis or premise demands. But much more important is the following law of life, that we must do what nature demands. For if we wish in every matter and circumstance to observe what is in accordance with nature, in everything we should make it our aim neither to avoid that which nature demands, nor to accept that which is against nature. The philosophers, therefore, train us first in the theory where there is less difficulty, and then after that lead us to the more difficult matters. For in theory, there is nothing that holds us back from following what we are taught, but in the affairs of life, there are many things that draw us away. It is ridiculous, then, for someone to say that they wish to begin with the latter, for it is not easy to begin with the more difficult things. And this is the defense that we ought to present to such parents who are angry because their children study philosophy. Very well then, Father, I go astray, not knowing what incumbent upon me is or what my duty is. Now if this is something that can neither be taught nor learned, why do you reproach me? But if it can be taught, teach me. And if you cannot do this, allow me to learn from those who claim to know. Really, What is your idea? That I intentionally fall into evil and miss the good? Far from it. What, then, is the cause of my going astray? Ignorance. Very well. Don't you want me to get rid of my ignorance? Whom did anger ever teach the art of steering or music? Do you think, then, that your anger will make me learn the art of living? Only he can speak like this who has applied himself to philosophy in such a spirit. But if a man reads about the subject and turns to the philosophers merely because he wants to show off his knowledge of hypothetical arguments at a banquet, what else is he doing but trying to impress some senator sitting beside him? Because in Rome, the great resources are truly found, while the riches of Nicopolis seem like mere child's play to them. Therefore, it is challenging for a person to control their external impressions in Rome, as there are many distracting influences. I know a man who clung to Epictetus' knees in tears, claiming to be miserable because he had nothing left but 1.5 million sesterces. So, what did Epictetus do? Did he laugh at him like you are? No, he simply expressed amazement and said, "Poor man, how did you manage to keep silent? How did you endure it?" Once, when Epictetus had disconcerted a student who was reading hypothetical arguments, the person who assigned the passage to be read laughed at him. In response, Epictetus said, "You are laughing at yourself. You did not give the young man proper training or assess whether he could understand these arguments. Instead, you treated him as a mere reader. Why is it then," he added, "that we entrust someone who cannot comprehend complex arguments with the task of assigning praise or blame, or passing judgment on what is done well or poorly? If such a person speaks ill of another, does the person being criticized pay any attention? And if such a person praises another, does the praised individual become elated? When the one who is dispensing praise or blame cannot even grasp the logical consequences in trivial matters like these. This, then, is the starting point of philosophy, a recognition of the state of one's own governing principle. Once a person realizes that their governing principle is weak, they will no longer wish to apply it to significant matters. However, some who cannot even digest a small morsel purchase an entire treatise and attempt to consume it. As a result, they vomit or suffer from indigestion, colics, and fevers. But they should have first considered whether they have the necessary capacity. Nevertheless, it is easy to refute someone who lacks knowledge in theoretical matters, but in real-life situations, a person does not subject themselves to refutation, and we despise those who have refuted us. However, Socrates used to advise us not to live a life unexamined. Chapter 27. In how many ways do external impressions arise? In what age should we have ready to deal with them? External impressions come to us in 4 ways. Either things are and appear to be so, or they are not and do not appear to be, or they are and do not appear to be, or they are not and yet appear to be. Therefore, it is the responsibility of an educated person to accurately assess these situations. But regardless of what distresses us, we should gather our reinforcements against it. If the things that distress us are the arguments of Pyrrho and the Academy, then we should gather our reinforcements against them. If it is the persuasiveness of things that leads us to believe certain things are good when they are not, then we should seek reinforcements in that area. If the source of our distress is a habit, we should strive to find the reinforcements to counter it. What support can be found to counteract habit? Well, it is the opposite habit. You often hear people saying, "That poor man. He's dead. His father and mother died, and he was taken away before his time, in a foreign land." But let us listen to the arguments on the other side. Let us distance ourselves from these expressions and replace one habit with the opposite habit. To counter sophistical arguments, we need logical processes, practice, and familiarity with them. Against the plausibility of things, we need clear preconceptions, sharpened like weapons, and readily available. When death appears to be a bad thing, we must have the argument ready that it is our duty to avoid bad things, and that death is inevitable. What can I do? Where can I go to escape it? Let us say I am Sarpedon, the son of Zeus, so that I can nobly say, as he did, "Since I have left my home for war, I either want to win the prize of valor myself, or give someone else the chance to win it. If I cannot succeed in something myself, I will not begrudge another the accomplishment of some noble deed." Granted, such an act as Sarpedon's is beyond us, but isn't the other alternative within our capabilities? And where can I go to escape death? Show me the country. Show me the people who are exempt from death. Show me a magic charm against it. If I do not have any, what do you want me to do? I cannot avoid death. Instead of living in fear of it, should I die in lamentation and trembling? Because the source of sorrow is to desire something that does not happen. So, if I can change external circumstances according to my own wishes, I will change them. But if I cannot, I am willing to harm the person who stands in my way. Because it is human nature not to tolerate being deprived of good things, not to tolerate falling into evil. Finally, when I can neither change the circumstances nor harm the person who stands in my way, I sit down and groan and curse whoever I can, Zeus and the other gods. Because if they do not care about me, what do they mean to me? Yes, you say, but that would be impious of you. Well, what could I get that is worse than what I have now? In short, we must remember that unless piety and self-interest are combined, piety cannot be maintained in anyone. Don't these considerations seem urgent? Let the followers of Pyrrho or the Academy come and oppose us. Personally, I have no time for such matters, nor can I advocate for the commonly accepted opinion. If I had a small lawsuit about a mere piece of land, I would have called someone else to be my advocate. So what evidence am I satisfied with? I am satisfied with the evidence that pertains to the matter at hand. As for the question of how perception arises, whether it comes from the entire body or from a specific part, I might not know how to give a reasonable answer, and both views confuse me. However, I am very certain that you and I are not the same people. How do I know this? Well, when I want to swallow something, I never take the morsel to that place, but to this place. When I want to eat bread, I never take sweepings, but I always go after the bread as if it were a target. And do you yourselves, who dismiss the evidence of the senses, do anything different? Who among you, when they want to go to a bath, goes to a mill instead? What then? Shouldn't we, to the best of our ability, hold on to the commonly accepted opinion and be cautious of arguments that seek to overthrow it? And who disputes that? Only the person who has the power and the leisure should dedicate themselves to these studies, while the person who is trembling and confused and whose heart is broken within them should dedicate their leisure time to something else. Chapter 28. We should not be angry with people. And what are the small and big things among people? What is the reason that we agree to something? It is because it appears to us to be so. Therefore, it is impossible to agree to something that appears not to be so. Why? Because that is the nature of the intellect, to agree with what is true, to be dissatisfied with what is false, and to withhold judgment regarding what is uncertain. What is the proof of this? Try to feel that it is now night. That is impossible. Get rid of the feeling that it is day. That is impossible. Either feel or get rid of the feeling that the stars are an even number. That is impossible. So when a person agrees to a falsehood, rest assured that it was not their intention to agree to it as false. For every soul is unwillingly deprived of the truth, as Plato says. It only seemed to them that the false was true. Now, in the realm of actions, what do we have that corresponds to the true, and the false in the realm of perceptions? We have duty and what goes against duty, the beneficial and the unbeneficial, what is appropriate for me and what is not appropriate for me, and anything like these. Can't a person think that something is beneficial to them, but still not choose it? They cannot. Take, for example, someone who says, now, I learn what horrors I intend. But passion overpowers rational thought. It is because she regards the fulfillment of her passion and seeking vengeance on her husband as more beneficial than saving her children. Yes, but she is deceived. Show her clearly that she is deceived, and she will not do it. But if you do not show it, what else does she have to follow but what appears to be true to her? Nothing. So why are you angry with her? Why not, if anything, pity her instead? Just as we pity the blind and people with disabilities, why don't we pity those whose ability to govern themselves has been impaired? Whoever keeps in mind that the basis of every action is the perception of one's senses, now this perception can be accurate or inaccurate. If accurate, the person is blameless. If inaccurate, they suffer the consequences. For it is impossible for the person who has gone astray to be one person, while the person who suffers is another. Whoever remembers this, I say, will not be enraged at anyone, will not be angry with anyone, will not insult anyone, will not blame, hate, or take offense at anyone. So, do you conclude that such great and terrible things have their origin in the perception of one's senses? In this and nothing else. The Iliad is nothing but a sensory perception and a poet's interpretation of sensory perceptions. Alexander had a perception to take Menelaus' wife, and Helen had a perception to follow him. Now, if Menelaus had a perception that it was a gain to be deprived of such a wife, what would have happened? We would have lost not only the Iliad but also the Odyssey. So, do matters of such great importance depend on something so small? But what do you mean by matters of such great importance? Wars, conflicts, deaths of many people, and destruction of cities? And what is so great about all of this? What? Nothing great about this? Why, what is so great about the death of many cows and sheep, or the burning and destruction of many bird nests? Is there any similarity between this and that? There is a great similarity. Human bodies perished in one case, and bodies of cows and sheep in the other. Small human dwellings were burned, and so were nests of birds. What is so great or dreadful about that? Or else show me how a human house and a bird's nest differ as places of habitation. Is there any similarity between a bird and a human? What are you saying? In terms of the body, there is a great similarity, except that human houses are made of beams, tiles, and bricks, while a bird's nest is made of sticks and clay. So, does a human not differ at all from a bird? Far from it. But in these matters, they do not differ. Then how do they differ? Seek and you will find that they differ in some other way. Let us see if it is not within his understanding what he does. Let us see if it is not within his ability for social action, and his faithfulness, his self-respect, his steadfastness, his security from error, his intelligence. So where then is the great evil and the great good among men? It is exactly where the difference lies. And if that element in which the difference lies is preserved and stands strong and well protected on every side, and neither his self-respect, nor his faithfulness, nor his intelligence is destroyed, then the man is also preserved. But if any of these qualities are destroyed or taken by force, then the man is also destroyed. And it is in this sphere that the great things are. Did Alexander come to his great downfall when the Greeks attacked Troy with their ships, and when they were devastating the land and when his brothers were dying? Not at all. Because no one comes to their downfall because of another's actions. But what happened then was merely the destruction of storks' nests. No, he came to his downfall when he lost his self-respect, his faithfulness, his respect for the laws of hospitality, his decency of behavior. When did Achilles come to his downfall? When Patroclus died? Far from it. But when Achilles himself was enraged, when he was crying over a trivial girl, when he forgot that he was there not to find sweethearts, but to make war. These are the downfalls that come to mankind. This is the siege of their city. This is the destruction of it. When their correct judgments are torn down, when these are destroyed. Then, when women are taken into captivity, and children are enslaved, and when the men themselves are killed, are not all these things evils? Where do you find the justification for adding this opinion? Let me know as well. No, on the contrary, you let me know where you find the justification for saying that they are not evils. Let us turn to our standards. Present your preconceptions. Because this is why I cannot be amazed enough at what men do. In a case where we want to judge weights, we do not judge randomly. Where we want to judge what is straight and what is crooked, we do not judge randomly. In short, where it matters to us to know the truth in the matter, none of us will do anything randomly. Yet, when it involves the first and only cause of acting rightly or wrongly, of prosperity or adversity, of failure or success, there alone are we random and impulsive. There I have nothing like a balance. There is nothing like a standard, but some sensory impression comes and immediately I go and act upon it. What? Am I any better than Agamemnon or Achilles? Are they to be blamed for following the impressions of their senses and causing or experiencing such evils, while I am to be content with the impressions of my senses? And what tragedy has any other source than this? What is the Atreus of Euripides? It is his sensory impression. The Oedipus of Sophocles? His perception. The Phoenix? His perception. The Hippolytus? His perception. What kind of a man, then, do you think he is who pays no attention to this matter? What are those men called who follow every perception of their senses? Madmen. Are we, then, acting differently? Chapter 29, Steadfastness. The essence of the good is a certain kind of moral purpose, and that of the evil is a certain kind of moral purpose. What, then, are the external things? They are materials for the moral purpose, in dealing with which it will find its own proper good or evil. How will it find the good? If it does not admire the materials. For the judgments about the materials, if they be correct, make the moral purpose good, but if they be crooked and awry, they make it evil. This is the law which God has ordained, and he says, if you wish any good thing, get it from yourself. You say, no, but from someone else. Do not so, but get it from yourself. For the rest, when the tyrant threatens and summons me, I answer, whom are you threatening? If he says, I will put you in chains, I reply, he is threatening my hands and my feet. If he says, I will behead you, I answer, he is threatening my neck. If he says, I will throw you into prison, I say, he is threatening my whole insignificant body, and if he threatens me with exile, I give the same answer. Does he, then, threaten you? Not at all. If I feel that all this is nothing to me, not at all. But if I am afraid of any of these threats, it is I whom he threatens. Who is there left, then, for me to fear? The man who is master of what? The things that are under my control? But there is no such man. The man who is master of the things that are not under my control. And what do I care for them? Do you philosophers, then, teach us to despise our kings? Far from it. Who among us teaches you to dispute their claim to the things over which they have authority? Take my insignificant body, take my property, take my reputation, take those who are about me. If I persuade any to lay claim to these things, let some man truly accuse me. Yes, but I wish to control your judgments also. And who has given you this authority? How can you have the power to overcome another's judgment? By bringing fear to bear upon him, he says, I shall overcome him. You fail to realize that the judgment overcame itself. It was not overcome by something else, and nothing else can overcome moral purpose, but it overcomes itself. For this reason, to the law of God is most good and most just, let the better always prevail over the worse. 10 are better than 1, you say. For what? For putting in chains, for killing, for dragging away where they will, for taking away a man's property. 10 overcome 1, therefore, in the aspect in which they are superior. In what, then, are they inferior? If the one possesses correct judgments, and the 10 do not. What then? Can they prevail in this aspect? How can they? But if we are weighed on the scales, won't the heavier side tip the balance? So that a Socrates may suffer what he did at the hands of the Athenians. Slave, why do you say Socrates? Speak of the matter and say that the insignificant body of Socrates may be carried off and dragged to prison by those who were stronger than him, and that someone may give poison to the insignificant body of Socrates, and that it may grow cold and die? Does this seem marvelous to you? Does this seem unjust? For this do you blame God? Did Socrates, then, have no compensation for this? In what did the essence of the good consist for him? Whom should we listen to? You or Socrates himself? And what does he say? Anytus and Miletus can kill me, but they cannot harm me. And again, if it is pleasing to God, so let it be. But do you prove that one who holds inferior judgments prevails over the man who is superior in judgments? You will not be able to prove this. No, nor even come close to proving it. For this is a law of nature and of God. Let the superior always prevail over the inferior. Prevail in what? In that in which it is superior. One body is stronger than another body. Several people are stronger than one. The thief is stronger than the honest man. That is why I lost my lamp, because in the matter of staying awake the thief was better than I was. However, he bought a lamp for an exceedingly high price. For a lamp he became a thief. For a lamp he became unfaithful. For a lamp he became beast-like. This seemed profitable to him. Very well, but now someone has grabbed me by my cloak and pulls me into the marketplace, and then others shout at me, Philosopher, what good have your judgments done you? See, you are being dragged off to prison. See, you are going to have your head cut off. And what kind of introduction to philosophy could I have studied, which would prevent me from being dragged off, if a man who is stronger than me should grab my cloak? Or would prevent me from being thrown into the prison, if 10 men should push me and throw me in? Have I, then, learned nothing else? I have learned to see that everything that happens, if it is outside the realm of my moral purpose, is nothing to me. Have you, then, derived no benefit from this principle for the present case? Why, then, do you seek your benefit in something other than that in which you have learned that it is? Well, as I sit in the prison I say, the person who shouts this at me neither understands what is meant, nor follows what is said. Nor has he made any effort at all to know what philosophers say, or what they do. Don't pay attention to him, but come out of the prison again. If you do not need me in the prison anymore, I will come out. If you ever need me there again, I will go back in. How long? For as long as reason decides that I should stay with my insignificant body, but when reason no longer chooses that, take it and good health to you. Just do not let me give up my life without reason, or faint-heartedly, or for some trivial excuse. Because, once again, God does not desire that, for he needs such a universe, and such men who wander upon the earth. But if he gives the signal to retreat, as he did with Socrates, I must obey the one who gives the signal, just like I would obey a general. So, what then? Should I say these things to the masses? For what purpose? Isn't it enough for a man to believe them himself? For example, when children come up to us and clap their hands and say, "Today is a good celebration," do we tell them, all of this is not good? Not at all. Instead, we clap our hands along with them. And so, when you cannot convince a man to change his opinion, realize that he is like a child and clap your hands for him. But if you do not want to do that, you simply have to keep quiet. A man should remember all of this, and when he is summoned to face such a difficulty, you should know that the time has come to show whether we are educated. Because a young man leaving school and facing a difficulty is like someone who has practiced solving complex problems, And if someone presents him with an easy one, he says, "No, give me one that is cleverly involved so that I can get some exercise from it." Even the athletes are dissatisfied with lightweight opponents. "He can't lift me," one says. "There's a strong young man over there." Oh no, but when the crisis comes, he must cry and say, "I wanted to keep learning." Learning what? If you do not learn these things in order to be able to demonstrate them in action, then what did you learn them for? I imagine that someone among those sitting here is struggling within their own soul and saying, "Alas, why doesn't a difficulty like the one this fellow is facing come to me now? Alas, now I must sit in a corner and waste away, when I could be crowned at Olympia. When will someone inform me of such a contest?" You should all have this mindset. But among Caesar's gladiators, there are some who complain because no one brings them out or matches them with an opponent, and they pray to God and go to their managers, begging to fight in single combat. And yet, none of you display a similar spirit? I wanted to sail to Rome for this very purpose, to see what my athlete is doing, what training he is following in his task. "I don't want," he says, "this kind of task." What? Do you have the power to choose any task you want? You have been given such a body, such parents, such brothers, such a country, such a position in it, and now you come to me and say, "Change the task for me"? Don't you have the resources to make use of what has been given? You should say, "It is up to you to set the task, and up to me to do it well." No. Instead you say, "Don't propose to me this specific hypothetical argument, but rather this one. Don't urge upon me this specific conclusion, but rather this one." A time will soon come when the tragic actors will think that their masks and shoes and the long robe are themselves. Man, all these things you have as a subject and a task. Say something, so that we may know whether you are a tragic actor or a comedian, because both have everything except their lines in common. Therefore, if someone were to take away from him both his shoes and his mask, and bring him on stage as a mere shadow of an actor, is the tragic actor lost, or does he remain? If he has a voice, he remains. And it is the same in real life. Take a position of authority. I take it, and having done so, I show how an educated person behaves. Put aside the fancy clothing, and come forward dressed in rags to match your character. So what? Hasn't it been given to me to have a powerful voice? In what role, then, do you enter the stage now? As a witness summoned by God. God says, "Go and bear witness for me, because you are worthy to be presented by me as a witness." Are any of those things which lie outside the realm of moral purpose either good or evil? Do I harm anyone? Have I put each person's advantage under the control of anyone but themselves? What kind of witness do you bear for God? I am in a difficult situation, O Lord, and in misfortune. No one pays attention to me. No one gives me anything. Everyone blames me and speaks ill of me. Is this the witness that you are going to bear? And is this the way in which you are going to disgrace the summons that he gave you, and that he bestowed this honor upon you, and deemed you worthy to be brought forward to bear such important testimony? But the one who has authority over you declares, "I pronounce you impious and profane." What has happened to you? I have been pronounced impious and profane. Is that all? Yes, nothing else. But if he had passed judgment on a hypothetical argument and declared, "I judge the statement, if it is day, there is light," to be false, what would have happened to the hypothetical argument? Who is being judged in this case? Who has been condemned? The hypothetical argument, or the person who has been deceived in their judgment about it? So, who is this person who has authority to make any declaration about you? Do they know what piety or impiety is? Have they thought about it? Have they learned it? Where? Under whose instruction? And yet a musician pays no attention to them if they declare that the lowest string is the highest, nor does a mathematician if the person decides that the lines extending from the center to the circumference of a circle are not equal. But should the truly educated person pay attention to an uninstructed person when they pass judgment on what is holy and unholy, and on what is just and unjust? How unjust it is for the educated to do so. Is this, then, what you have learned here? Will you not leave these petty quibbles about these things to others, incapable of trying, so that they may sit in a corner and collect their petty fees, or complain because nobody gives them anything? And will you not yourself come forward and make use of what you have learned? Because what is lacking now is not quibbles. No, the books of the Stoics are full of quibbles. What, then, is currently lacking? It is the person who can utilize these teachings, the person who can demonstrate the arguments through their actions. This is the role I want you to take on, so that we may no longer rely solely on old examples in our teachings, but also have some contemporary examples. Whose responsibility is it, then, to contemplate these matters? It is the responsibility of those who dedicate themselves to learning, for humans are creatures that have a natural inclination towards contemplation. However, it is shameful to contemplate these things passively, like runaway slaves. Instead, we should strive to be free from distractions and attentively listen, whether it be to a tragic actor or a musician, but not in the same manner as those runaways. For when one of them is paying attention and praising the tragic actor, they still take a moment to look around, and if someone mentions the word master, they become instantly anxious and disturbed. It is disgraceful for philosophers to contemplate the workings of nature in such a manner. For what does it mean to have a master? One person is not the master of another person, but rather, death, life, pleasure, and hardship are the true masters. So bring Caesar to me, if he is without these things, and you will see how resolute I am. But when he comes with them, causing thunder and lightning, and I become afraid, what have I done but acknowledge my master, just like a runaway slave? However, if I have, in a sense, only a temporary relief from these threats, I am still behaving like a runaway slave who is merely a spectator in a theater. I may bathe, drink, and sing, but I do all of it with fear and misery. But if I free myself from my masters, that is, from those things that make masters terrifying, what further trouble do I have? What master do I have anymore? What then? Should I proclaim this to everyone? No, but I must treat those who are not professional philosophers with understanding and say, this person advises me based on what they believe is good in their own situation. Therefore, I excuse them. Socrates, for example, excused the jailer who wept for him when he was about to drink the poison, and remarked, how generously he has wept for us. Did he say to the jailer, this is why we sent the women away? No, but he made that remark to his close friends, to those who could understand it. However, he treated the jailer with kindness, like a child. Chapter 30. What assistance should we have readily available in times of difficulty? When you find yourself in the presence of a prominent individual, remember that there is another who observes what is happening from above, and that it is him whom you must please, rather than that person. The one above will then ask you, in your teachings, what did you call exile, imprisonment, bonds, death, and disrepute? I called them indifferent things. And what do you call them now? Have they changed at all? No. Have you yourself changed? No. Tell me, then, what are indifferent things? They are things that are unrelated to moral purpose. Tell me also what follows. Things unrelated to moral purpose hold no significance for me. Tell me also what you believed were good things. Having a proper moral purpose and making proper use of external impressions. And what was the end? To follow you. Do you still say all of that even now? I still say the same things even now. So, enter with confidence and keep all of this in mind, and you will see what it means to be a young person who has studied what they should, when they are in the presence of individuals who have not studied. As for me, my goodness, I believe that you will feel somewhat like this. Why do we go through such extensive and intricate preparations for something that ultimately means nothing? Is this what authority is all about? Is this what the entrance hall, the attendants, the armed guards amount to? Is it for all of this that I endured those lengthy speeches? Well, all of this never amounted to anything significant, yet I was getting ready for it as if it were something of great importance.